Imagine a universe in which every flash of light, whisper of wind, and drop of rain are more than just natural occurrences. They are signs, whispers of endless options all around you. The most beautiful power of life is waiting to be found in this holy place. It calls you to explore old secrets that will teach you how to use this power to your benefit. It's not enough to just understand the outside world. This trip is a quest to find the huge universe that lives inside you. From the deepest parts of your being to the furthest reaches of your imagination, you will have to figure out the secrets of existence yourself. You will have life-changing discoveries during this trip that will change how you see the world. When you understand that everything in the universe is linked to everything else, you will be able to handle life with deep knowledge, love that doesn't change, and unwavering power. You're about to start a trip that has never been done before. It will change how you see the world and how you see yourself. This message from the universe is a call to discover your real potential and follow it to a life of meaning, satisfaction, and unchangeable happiness. You will learn not only how to use the power of life to your benefit, but also how to be a mindful maker of your own world, making a way full of light, love, and endless options. This is the power of life and how to use it. Title: The Sun and the Shadow. The sun gives off heat and light that this old world would not be possible without. Thank you for the heat and light, which are giving us power and knowledge. However, the old sun also sends out a third type of ray that we can't so easily praise: actinic rays. These rays are poisonous and break things down. Some people say that there was a time when a huge vaporous dome hung over the Earth and rotated with it, like Jupiter's vaporous domes do now. They say that this vaporous dome blocked most of the actinic rays, but let light and heat through. This is how they explain Adam and Methuselah's long lives. They also say that we will never reach immortality in the flesh unless this vaporous dome is made around our planet again to block these dangerous rays. In the same way that heat and light rays are thought to be powerful and wise, they say that actinic rays are destructive. They also think that the attacker must be sent into the outer darkness and blocked out by the protected mist dome before people can be saved. It's an interesting idea that seems likely, right? But there are still things that need to be looked at. There might not be any more death if a huge wet mist was spread over the Earth right now, but there also wouldn't be any more growth. It would stay the same for all living things, wrinkles and all. Why? Because old forms have to break down before new ones can be made from said stuff. As an example, look at a photography plate. It has a glass surface that is covered with a thin layer of gelatin. It looks like that if you put it in a dark room with a red light on it. You can leave it there for as long as you want, and it will still look the same. Put it in the dark room now and go have fun. The thin film isn't affected, but when you find a beautiful forest that you want to record, you focus on it, and with a click, the jelly surface changes for a split second. After letting those actinic lights in, the camera goes back to being dark. Now you go back into the dark room and turn on the red light. This time you see a copy of your beautiful forest on the soft jelly surface. If you let in a little light, your picture would disappear in an instant and the fine jelly would break down. But you don't let sunshine in. Instead, you fix your piece of forest by putting the plate in a solution that turns the gelatin particles into glass. Light can't affect that gelatin anymore. You have the picture, but the delicate goo will never again have any life, growth, change, or opportunities. If you could live forever under a red light, though, you wouldn't have to fix your negative. It would always have that picture on it. And if you kept living under the red light, you could throw away your camera and plates because you would never take another picture or need such entertainment again, at least not for long. After a few days, you would get sick, and after a few more days, you would go crazy. Eventually, nature would fix you, and nothing else would change. Maybe experts have tried putting a dead body under red glass to keep the actinic rays from getting to it. This would stop the body from breaking down and the face from changing. You see, actinic rays, which are the sun's harmful rays, are necessary for all change in the picture plate. It's likely that the actinic rays soften and split the gelatin atoms, which then instantly change shape to match the scene they are facing. Without the actinic rays to soften it, the gelatin would not be able to make itself into the scene it faces. It also would not be able to see or feel the scene without the light and heat rays. A camera negative needs all three types of rays: light, heat, and actinic, even if actinic rays are present. Some people believe that all inventions are just crude copies of parts found in the human body and brain, and that man himself holds all the inventions that have ever been thought of or will ever be thought of. Another way to say this is that people are the microcosm and the universe is the macrocosm. One more way to say the same thing is through Victor Hugo. Man is an infinitely small copy of God. All of photography happens in the brain and body. Every thought or image is recorded in a single cell. There is also no cell that can't be cleared of that impression, made more sensitive, and given a new one. For all we know, cells may live forever, as science says. If that's the case, each cell must have gone through this process of cleaning, resensitizing, and re-imprinting billions of times, with a huge number of options in each step. Cutting off actinic rays from the sun is what makes things that aren't made of marble last forever. It's true that actinic rays cause dissolution, but resolution comes after dissolution. Dissolution makes room for even higher kinds of light, heat, knowledge, and love power. The rays that destroy and nature that destroy are blessed because they are the only ones who make room for God and clean up and organize the mess that God leaves behind. But when the race was young, it looked at the work that these actinic rays did and felt fear. It saw things die and saw destruction in the path of the wind, and like any kid, it made up bad things and called the power that destroyed things devils, which means destroyer. He also saw the idea of building and progress in nature and pictured a builder. But because he was a child, he thought that the killer and the builder were always at odds with each other and were enemies. That was before the race thought that two could work together. Back then, it was each wild man for himself, and he took the second option. So the baby race started to love God, the builder, and hate and fear the destroyer. Because it didn't know any better, it took on the forms of both. But every once in a while, a clear-sighted person came along and saw the truth. God spoke through Isaiah and said, "Behold, I make peace and create evil. I, the Lord, do all these things." Solomon said that the Lord creates evil for the day of evil, and every Bible prophet has tried to show how one, wise, powerful, and present God is. All life is one. He is God visible. The destroyer is part of the Trinity and can't be thrown out like knowledge and the power of love. You can be sure that the destroyer only touches things that need to be broken down and changed. Something important in your life has been taken away, but don't be sad. You were destroyed or taken away to make room for even greater things. God gives and takes away based on your deepest desires. The enemy only cleans the plate for a more beautiful picture. Be still and know that everything is working toward the fulfillment of your deepest desires. Do not fight things. Triplicity of Being is the title of Chapter 2. Thomson Hott Hudson made the case that man is made up of 3 layers, not just 1 or 2. The most visible level is the aware or external mind. This is the mind we use when we're awake. Then there is the subconscious mind, also called the subjective or subconscious mind. This part of the mind takes in information and knowledge that has been processed by the aware mind. The subconscious part of the mind is where memories and feelings that were formed in the conscious mind at some point in time live. Sub means under, and the subconscious mind is below the waking mind, like the depths of a lake are below the top. But there is a third level of mind that is above and beyond the conscious and subconscious minds. Hudson mixes up the functions of this third level of mind with those of the subconscious mind. This level of mind could be called the superconscious mind, the mind above the conscious mind, or the mind above consciousness. We love God with all our minds, since all knowledge comes from Him. The conscious mind serves as the link between what we have learned in this and earlier states of existence and the infinite store of truth that still needs to be discovered. The subconscious mind is like the deepest part of a pool. Every drop of water in the subconscious mind has been on the top at some point and can be brought back at any time. But the subconscious mind is like the rain and streams that come down from the snow-covered mountains and fill up the lake all the time. The subconscious mind stores what we already know and what we do without thinking about it. The conscious mind can always remember these things. The conscious mind is where we are learning right now. The superconscious mind is where all wisdom, knowledge, and power are stored. It's where we live, move, and have our being, and hope and inspiration can bring us everything we want to know. The universe we can see is both the conscious and subconscious mind of God. It shows what has been thought from the universal pool of truth, but it's only a taste of the great things that are still waiting for us to strive for and be inspired by. Think about all the great things that have been found and made in the last 60 years. They were all thought of from that one big source. Also, keep in mind that he hasn't seen, heard, or listened to the great superconscious realm's glory that still awaits us. A star-shaped figure by Madame Bohème shows both identity and unity. Each point on the star represents a person or a made character. That is, it reflects the person's nature or inner self. The star's core stands for God, the mind that knows everything and is one with everyone. When we only look at the points on the unseen side, we see difference and separation. But when we look outward from the center toward the points, we see that the points and centers are the same thing, with no lines separating them. Now picture a line that cuts each point from the center. This line doesn't have to be real, but it should give you a good idea of what the conscious mind is like. The conscious mind is the bridge between our personalities and the unity of all of us. It is the place where the human and the divine parts of us meet, and it's where what we've realized meets the endless pool of beauty that is still to be realized. If you look at the star from the middle, you'll see that each point is just a small bay that sticks out from the middle. Each person is an opening to God, and each mind is an opening to the divine mind. The aware mind is the line where the personal mind and the divine mind meet. If a person looks down and is focused on their physical self, or if they look up and want to reach the God part of themselves, it's easy to see that their conscious mind would be full of personality or spirituality. Now, picture the center of the star as something fluid, always alive and free, and the points as something almost solid, partially fixed. Picture the points as holding water of life that is so muddy with false beliefs that it keeps depositing layers of mud along its edges that harden over time, making the water thicker and the beaches wider. This will help you understand the difference between personality and uniformity. Now, imagine that the conscious mind has will. As it moves toward the star point, or the material part of itself, it gets tense with anxiety and closes the point from the center out, stopping the life currents from flowing freely through the star point, or personality. In other words, the identity dries up. This is how we age. Next, picture a mind filled with faith and love, pointing toward the center of life. With this broader view and knowledge of life, Imagine how lightly it would hold the personality things of that small personality point, knowing that the personality is just a small entrance of divinity, and that the wide opening between the two is always open, that the personality exists because of ever-changing currents of divinity, and that its own grasping and striving are the only things that can stop the currents. When the conscious mind realizes all of this, it moves away from the identity that has already been formed and widens the door to the great heart of all life. Mind that is aware. It looks up, not down, and goes into its world of love, knowledge, and power. This is what motivates and inspires us. You can get what you want if you call on your superconscious mind, which is the one mind that knows everything. If you believe that you receive, you will get whatever you ask this mind. Most of the time, when you can't ask with faith, it's because you haven't thought about God enough. God is the divine being who made everything. People, things, and material things make God seem weak, far away, and useless when we think about them too much. We lose faith that we will get what we ask for. It's important for us to take time every day to disconnect from the real world and think about how we are all connected to omniscient, power, omnipresence, and each other. This is how hope gets stronger. Hope and inspiration become habits of thought, and life's streams flow easily through us. The one Spirit will lead you through everything in life, and you will only be safe if you do what it says. If you want to know what the Spirit is telling you, use the golden rule to test your urges. The Spirit is love for everyone. Part 3. The body, the mind, and the soul. We all think that there is a separate soul that leaves the body when we die. If this is true, then this separate soul must be made up of cellular souls, just like the body is made up of cells. The body is called the home, the house where we live, and the shell. When we die, only the more gross parts of our bodies are shed. The soul of each cell rises, still organized in its own soul, and the cells of the body become one because the soul is no longer holding them together. This backs up Theosophy's claim that there is a spiritual body inside the material body that looks like the material body but is more beautiful. Many people say they've seen this astral body leave its temple. Paul may have been talking about this when he said there are two bodies. It makes sense to think that this spiritual body holds all the knowledge gained in this state of existence, and that in a new incarnation, past experiences are forgotten, just like we forget 1,000 things every day. Our minds were always thinking about it, but it didn't bother us enough to make us think about it. A child's interest in this life keeps memories of past lives deep in his subconscious. If he really wanted to and thought about it for a long time, he could remember things that happened in past lives, just like he can remember something from yesterday or last year that he has forgotten for a while. The Society for Psychical Research has records of a lot of strange cases of dual or multifaceted personality, etc., that seem to support this idea of soul and body. Many people claim to have remembered past states of existence by desire and concentration, and many claim to have flashes of recollection without any special desire or intention. I believe that the soul is the pure life force that is one with the spirit, that material experiences shape and organize the life force or soul force into individuality, and that we get rid of the physical parts of our bodies as quickly as possible, just like lower living things get rid of their shells when their vertebrae show up. The shell protects and shapes the life form until it is fully formed and organized enough to get rid of the shell. The physical body is thrown away when it becomes too stiff and hard for the growing mind or soul. It's as if the soul, through growth and desire, steps into a new incarnation where the material is better. As long as the body is living and flexible enough to adapt to how the person grows and changes, the soul will continue to change in its matrix, which is its body day by day as needed. But an overly stiff matrix or body has to be thrown away and replaced with a new one. The body comes from the soul, and when it can't show the soul's growth, it is thrown away. Your astral and physical bodies store your past lives and the learning that you've gained from them. The objective mind in the brain is the top of this store and the door that all of this wisdom and knowledge went through to get into the person's organization. There is a lot of understanding and knowledge in our bodies, and our brains let us use them whenever we want. The objective mind controls and guides not only the phone exchange, but also all the sub-storages that are linked to it. The objective mind is also linked to the infinite source of knowledge, which it accesses through how we understand things. Because we are connected to the universe, we can go beyond our inner understanding and the things we've learned in past lives. To get better, we only need the superconscious wisdom. Just like desire and concentration can help us remember the knowledge and wisdom we've gained in past lives, they can also help us call up even more wisdom and knowledge than we thought possible. When you die, your body breaks down into a bunch of cellular cocoons. The organized cellular minds that were in those cocoons have moved to other states of being. When the soul leaves the body stops feeling things, and the atoms break apart into what they were before, bits of dead matter that aren't dead at all. The atoms of matter are the same after death as they were before, but the spirit and soul, spirit or soul, since there is no line between them, that organized and guided them, have left. This means that each atom can live its own little life again, separate from the lives of other atoms. Atoms turn into ashes without this organizing spirit to pull them together and keep them together. The body is organized into units called cells. Each cell is packed with many atoms. The soul leaves the cell, just like the soul leaves the body as a whole. Currently, I have no doubt that the astral body is made up of cell souls, just like the physical body is made up of cells. It also makes sense to me to think that the soul or astral body stores all of a person's memories from the beginning of time. I have no doubt that this astral grows in grace, knowledge and wisdom with each life and experience. It is drawn to the exact family and state it needs to help it grow in grace by the power of universal attraction. Part 4. How to concentrate without having a clear goal in mind. There is no way to get anything done. A goal that is too tightly defined makes it impossible to get much done. To achieve something, you have to do this. It sounds hard, but it's really very simple. So simple that a child can do it. The main point of the problem is that no one lives or dies by themselves. We are all connected to each other. Everything is moving toward a divine event that no one has fully understood yet, and maybe no one ever will, because how can the hand or the foot understand how the whole body works and what it's for? There is one goal that all other purposes are based on and includes. It is said that every person has one great mind, one heart, and one mission. There really is a plan for salvation, and we are all moving toward it, whether we know it or not. It's not just a story based on superstitions. We are all drawn to a divine ideal. Even the fool who says in his heart that there is no God and no unity of life and purpose can catch glimpses of it. Just as our bodies are all parts of God's body, so are our ideals and goals. Your hand knows what it wants to do when it feels the urge to grab or let go, but does it know what you want it to do when it feels the urge? It's possible that the hand knows how to move itself, but can it also understand what you're doing? Even though the hand says, "I want to grasp this," does it really understand why you want to grasp? You say things like, "I want to paint pictures," "I want to make money," "I want to teach," "I want to be a housewife and mother," and "I want to build bridges." But can you explain why you want to do these things or others? You can describe the big want, of which your own want is just a bud. You can see the general ideal, which is made up of your ideal. It's impossible for you to see your own want because it's too big for you to understand from your point of view. Say, "I want to be a bridge builder" to yourself ever. Then, after becoming a great bridge builder, you started to dislike the business and thought, "I want to be a painter instead of a bridge builder." You didn't understand why building bridges wasn't fulfilling your desires. You can picture the hand getting angry because you want to let go of the book after hanging on to it for a while. Of course, the hand wouldn't know why it couldn't stick to its first wish and wouldn't see any reason to let go. So are we, as parts of the amazing whole, with the purpose and desire of the whole world running through us. We know what we want and what we don't want. When we're on the animal plane, we just give in to our wants when we can, and we're happy until we have another want. We start to think about our wants over time. Some of them are good, and we try to please them. Some of them are bad, and we fight them hard. We can't figure out why we want either of these things. When we want to make pictures after learning how to build bridges, we fight the urge and keep building bridges. After that, if the general purpose really wants us to stop making bridges and start painting, it will keep pushing us in that direction until we figure out how to paint. If we are too stubborn, the general will push us away and let our kids paint the pictures. If we are too stubborn, the general want will push us away and give the painting to our children and grandchildren. This is how it is. Because everyone wants to, you've taught your good right hand to sew and thread needles until it can almost do it in the dark. That little trick is known to all the nerves, brains, and muscles in your fingers. Now, because everyone wants something different, you decide that your good right hand will learn how to play scales on the piano. Before you play the notes, you put your hand on the piano and sit down. But your fingers have never done anything like this before. Every muscle and nerve in the finger is stiff, and every part of its brain says it doesn't know how to play scales. You can't do your job, which is to sew. So you don't tell yourself things like, "My fingers are so stiff and stubborn, they won't listen to me at all." Instead, you keep sending your will over and over to them. Every day you work at it for a long time, and slowly you notice that your fingers have picked up the new skill and can do it without you having to think about it or want it. You kept putting your want into that hand until it became your want, and the hand used its will to fight your want. The hand is now working for and with it. Why did you do it? Because the universal will kept coming to you until you started to do it, just like you put your will into theirs until they wanted to do it and did it. Were your fingers really tangled up? They fought, twisted, and tried to copy each other's moves. What did you do with them? For a much longer time than you would have if they were more cooperative, you kept them at it. You made them practice over and over until they could do the work freely, creatively, and with art. Then you gave them pretty things to play with instead of tough ones to work with. You're right. The beautiful things to play are made of the same kinds of things your fingers have been working hard on, but there is no repeat in beautiful play at all. Scales are fun to learn and hard to practice, but without them, there would never be a rewarding game. We get better at doing one thing at a time by doing it over and over again. All of these moves come together in play to make a fun and rewarding game. We wait for the activity to be just right, because that's the only way to have fun playing. That's why we keep training. We keep doing it for longer and harder as our fingers show more surface area. That's all. Now, the general will make sure that we always do things the same way. The universe is working toward a beautiful goal of perfect play, where each part of it will shine, willing and able to play the music of the spheres with ease and joy. We have to stick to our habits until we get better at them. Because you and I are pretty set in our ways and don't like to follow through. "Oh, if only I could find my right niche," we say. But no matter what I do, I feel stuck here. We say we don't like the kind of pattern we're stuck in. There must be something wrong with the universe, our finances, or our families. We shouldn't have to work on one thing when we want to or are ready to do something else. When we put our fingers on the scales, they scream the same way. "Oh," they scream, "why do we have to keep doing this same boring thing over and over again when our souls long for beautiful harmony?" They don't think about the fact that they have to practice scales over and over again, even though they want to play happy music with beautiful melodies. We don't often think about the fact that our hearts long for bigger things, leaving us stuck in things like doing the dishes, going to work, or making bridges. But it's true. Great ideals can't be perfected until the details are perfected. And while we do things like doing the dishes, going about our daily business, and building bridges, we're perfecting the details of self-control, body and brain control, that will let us play the great harmonies our souls already feel. The great things we feel and want but can't say are the universal ideal that every soul aims for, whether they know it or not. We see the perfection of this great ideal through a darkly smoked glass. We get different half-glimpses of it and argue a lot about it, but none of us really knows even a small part of the glory, beauty and joy of that universal ideal that includes all of our personal ideals and acts on them. It hasn't shown us what we will be yet. You see, we all know that when the great ideal comes true, we will all be able to enjoy its beauty because we will have each done our part to make that ideal come true. We can all feel the universal ideal pulling us slowly toward an unfathomable good, but none of us can think of the specifics of that good yet. Hanford Henderson calls it the indeterminate good, and we all hope and work for it. It is our big ideal, which includes all of our smaller and more fleeting ideals, as well as our wants and goals. We are wrong about what a goal is when it comes to our high ideals. A broad goal is needed for an uncertain good. People who are sure of their big goal will eventually end up on a ridge in the middle of a cold night with their things stolen from them, just like Perkins in Quincy Adams Sawyer. They will say things like, "I know exactly where the flowers will appear when the earth blooms as a rose, and I know exactly what day they will appear, so I will only make those exact places and prepare my ascension garments for that exact hour." When someone is too sure of a divine event that will happen in the future, they miss the chance to speed it up right now. The wise person looks ahead, but the foolish person looks to the ends of the earth. When a person is too sure of the unknown good, they lose the good that is happening now. He gives up what's good right now. When someone tries for the big good that they can't reach, they miss the small goods that are close by and need to be reached. What do we think of a shooter who only aimed at the bigger house because it was out of his reach while the small animals played at his feet? We'd think he's a fool who should go hungry. We miss out on chances when we try to catch big game that is out of reach. We should believe in the great goal instead of trying to reach it. Only aim for what you can reach and trust that time and spirit will take care of the rest. You are in the present. Your aim will get better if you keep it on the things that matter right now. Then you'll be ready for the great things that happen in the present. Where are you right now? If you're going to build a bridge, make this one the best one ever. Now that you want to improve your work, make sure you enjoy it all. Only when you're happy can you see how to make your work and methods better, and being good at building bridges gives you the freedom to follow your next goal. The better you are at your job, the higher up you will move and the more money you will make. When you have more money, you have more time to work on your next dream. The money will keep coming in as you get better at what you do. If you like what you do for a living, you will be more productive and make more money. The slave is shackled to his job because he doesn't give it the love, interest and joy that would help it get better over time. He says he can't start a new job because he doesn't have enough money. That is very true. There is a general spirit that moves us, that takes money away from us until we have learned enough about this to be able to do other job. You want to paint pictures and build bridges at the same time, but you're not rich enough to quit building bridges and paint pictures full-time. To sum up, I tell you to believe in your desire to make pictures because it comes from a desire that everyone has and will be satisfied. Your desire is the desire of all power and all knowledge, and it will never be met. In due time, all of your wishes will come true. If you want to speed things up, then believe in your goal, but try to make peace first. Make the work you already have better and better until you can start a new line of work. Also, treat every part of building your bridge as if it were a painting of the bigger picture. You can smear paint on a painting with a chamber hairbrush, but does that mean you'll be able to see clearly, touch delicately, think clearly, and present yourself powerfully? Not at all. Building bridges is a good way to learn how to be a great painter. While you are still in it, put your whole soul into it and give it every chance to do its job. Believe in your desire to paint, but put your attention on the bridge you are currently making. Don't give up, and remember your goal. It could happen at any time. It will make it possible to go from making bridges to drawing pictures. Chapter 5. What Things Are Made Of. I have gotten some good out of these lessons. They don't seem to have a very useful result in some ways. You can focus and get small things, but any real change in the world seems to rest on a lot of things I can't change. That's what a narrow-minded and dishonest person writes. Not having faith because he can't see clearly. It takes 20 years of focus to grow an oak tree, but one night of focus can make a mushroom grow. Another woman who has seen the same things writes, "If I don't see great results now, I know it's because I'm working for great things." A woman focuses on making a good dinner, sewing a little, holding her tongue for an hour, getting a new hat, and getting rid of her headache. She is successful in all of her efforts. That's all they are, small things that are used up quickly and then forgotten. The same woman focuses on wanting a total change in her mood or surroundings for anything that seems very different from how things are now. What this means is that she doesn't trust much or anything she can't see, hear, taste, smell, or touch. It's true that she can see, taste, and smell an oak tree. But he can't see the nut growing in the ground, so he doesn't believe that an oak tree is there. Plus, if he can see a small oak tree, he can't make it grow, no matter how hard he tries. She is afraid that the oak isn't growing because of this. The woman with big eyes, on the other hand, is not like the others. She can hear, smell, and taste what moves over the face of the deep and makes things. She can see through things. She feels the real stuff, the stuff that lies beneath the things that aren't yet there. Her faith is in the life that can't be seen. For the other woman, hope only comes from things she can see. Because of HB's past, it would be false to say that he doesn't believe in God. Without hope, nothing would be able to live. Faith is in the world, and we use it to live, just like fish use water to live. Every person has faith that comes from the global source and lasts forever. Telling someone they have little or a lot of faith is like telling them the earth is flat. Every soul lives by hope and has plenty. But what does it live by faith in? That's where it gets tricky. Until we get past a sense of matter, and so far no one has done more than stick their nose out of the water. We believe in things we can see, hear, smell, taste, and touch. Right now, these are the only things we know about. We put our faith in them and are proud of how smart, logical, and free of superstitions we are. Our happy cry is, "I can't believe in anything unless I can see it." You can't fool me with your religious trickery, nor with your rabbit's foot and horseshoe and four-leaf clover. I see no connection between a rabbit's foot and your good fortune. Therefore, I know there is no connection. I cannot see a great God on a great white throne. Consequently, I know none exists. Show me your God. Show me the string that connects the four-leaf clover with your good fortune, and I will put my faith in it. The material doesn't matter without its invisible host. In the end, the unseen starts to mess with him, and his beautiful plans, which he could see through to the end, fall apart. The things he put so much faith in start to shake and fall around him, and he can't figure out why. Even though he doesn't want to, he starts to understand that there are strong forces around him that he can't see. Everything in his beautiful world starts to move to the beat of strings he can't see. He can't see, hear, smell, taste, or touch some things then. It looks like there is a lot of fear and chaos, but there is. He was sure he could see, smell, hear, taste, and feel everything, but then he starts to reach for the things he can't see. He keeps looking in the dark and quiet. As he looks, his ideas slowly lose their hold on the old things he can see, and he starts to reach out into the silence and darkness. His views go into the unseen and feel their way through it, always looking for the strings that the visible things are dancing and stumbling on. At first, everything is dark, but trust slowly grasps something that can't be seen. Something there, something that can't be seen, controls what man suggests. Even though it wasn't seen, heard, smelled, or touched, a terrible something, an all-powerful something that was always there, reached into the invisible and touched God, the soul, the life principle that gives and takes away all the little things he used to believe in. The goal is to figure out what this strong thing that lives in the unseen is made of. But how can we find out what the unseen is? At least not at first. Not by smell, taste, hearing, sight, touch, or taste. But you will know them by their fruits. You can tell if a tree is good or bad by its flowers. It's not clear whether the unseen powers are good or bad, and the material knows what the fruits are because he built such beautiful things with them, so he should be the one to judge the results of hard work. All of the things he worked on were good. He knows they were. If only the great unseen one hadn't ruined everything for them. Oh, the invisible's work undid all of his good work. The power that can't be seen must be terrible and evil. Its fruits are the destruction of the good things they built. They are afraid of this big, unseen power that their beliefs are starting to hold on to. But wait, good things are starting to grow from the ashes of their destruction. It looks like this terrible disaster is turning out to be a good thing. When fruits fall off, new, better things grow in their place, and they are good. No doubt this great unseen one works in a scary way, but the fruits of his efforts are good. Now that he is ready to talk to God, he starts to see things that can't be seen. His views help him understand them. If you want to find him, you have to believe that he is, and that he will repay those who work hard to find him. You have to believe that the unseen forces exist, and that they honor people who work hard to understand and use them. Only then can you understand, feel, and use them. The world we can see is moved by things we can't see. The matter goes with the world because it believes in the same things as the world. He is just a puppet for the forces that can't be seen. When he lets go of the ideas that held him back from the outside world and sends his faith out into the unknown, he becomes one with the forces that run the world. As the saying goes, faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things unseen. The material's faith is tied to things that have already been seen. Because of this, its creative power is put into things that have already been made. Then life tugs and plays with things until the ideas of the material lose their material ties and reach out to the unknown in search of new things to hold on to. What can we hold on to when everything we can see has let us down? When homes, land, money, friends, and even our parents, brothers, sisters, friends, homes, and land have turned their backs on us? And how could we live if we didn't have something to believe in? Without ideas to hold us up, we would not be able to live. See the people who kill themselves or die from broken hearts. Also, if everything we can see fails us, if our values are no longer tied to our parents, brothers, friends, homes and lands, then the only place they can become strong again is in the unseen. The area where the wind blows wherever it wants, and you can hear its sound but don't know where it comes from or where it goes, the area where the source of power is found. Be creative. It seems awful to be separate from our parents, brothers, friends, homes and places when it comes to our values. But time always shows that it's good for us. When we separate our ideas from the creative energy that shapes the world, they reach the unseen and move closer to the energy of being one with everything. We change into a new kind of being that is one with the creative power that is all around us. What are the things we can't see that our broken ideas start to cling to? Our faith is something that we can't see. It's what makes things we hope for real and solid proof of things we haven't seen yet. What do we hope for that we haven't seen yet? First, we hope for peace, which is another thing that can't be seen but is real. We hope for love, which is the most solid thing that we can't see. We could feel good about losing everything else if we only had peace and love. And lo and behold, our broken beliefs connect to the unseen substance of peace and love through the unseen threads of faith. Wisdom is something that can't be seen. Our ideas connect to the source of knowledge that we can't see. Thought can't be seen. When we separate our ideas from things, they start to reach the unseen world of thinking. Ideals are things that can't be seen. When our views aren't tied to what has already happened, they start to focus on ideas that aren't obvious, like race ideas, family ideas, and finally, our own ideas. Our hidden beliefs merge with these hidden ideals, and it is through these tiny faith tentacles that we begin to bring the ideal into our bodies and into the visible world. Through the tendrils of our faith, the ideal is actually put into words and made clear. When our values were tied to things we could not change, those things sucked the life out of us. Now, our faith's fingers reach up into the invisible ideal realm of the true substance of life, which is opposite to us. And by the same law of dynamics, it is we who take life from the invisible ideal realm of the true substance of life. We weren't able to do anything. The things that our beliefs tied us down to sucked life and secret powers from us. They finally tore us away. But because we believe in something that can't be seen, the Father works righteously in us and through us to bring peace. Wow, look at that. We are filled with an unseen power, and because we believe in the invisible, we give others the fruits of the Spirit, which are love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, loyalty, humility, and moderation. And because we are filled with the power of the unseen, we give the gifts of the Spirit to our parents, brothers, friends, homes, and places. Every time we do something or breathe, we pass them on. We breathe out what the great unseen breathes into us through our trust cords. Then, behold, what is written is fulfilled. You shall receive 100-fold, houses and lands and fathers and mothers and brothers and sisters in this present time. You shall have them to use at will. As long as you were bound by your beliefs to things, they used you. Now you use them. Secure your beliefs to invisible things and let patience do its perfect work. Thus, you will realize the full desire of your heart. Let things move as they will. Let facts be stubborn and conditions be difficult. If necessary, pay no attention to them. To attend to them is to secure your beliefs to them. Attend to the invisible things. Secure your beliefs to your ideals. Disregard facts and difficult conditions. Believe in the invisible. Direct your beliefs upward. Whatever you ask for, believe that you receive it, and you will have it for sure. If it is a mushroom, expect it in one night. If you desire a great oak tree, give it time to grow in due season. Perhaps in an hour when you least expect it, it will surely appear. All that is necessary is to secure your little beliefs to the invisible source of all things. Believe in the great invisible part of yourself and the universe. Chapter 6. Getting to the Substance. All desirable and as yet unexpressed things are in the silence, waiting to be brought into expression through aspiration and inspiration. Of course, one can breathe in and breathe out anywhere and under almost any conditions. I remember a great aspiration of mine that was fulfilled while sitting in a crowded streetcar, with people standing in front of me and others clinging to the railing. The things of silence are present everywhere, permeating solid things as X-rays do. All creation cannot prevent a man from communing invisibly at any time and in any place. All creation cannot prevent it, except when he allows it. But therein lies the rub. He allows it to interfere, unless he is in an almost anguished fervor for invisible things. That momentous hour on the crowded streetcar came after weeks of very earnest searching, after weeks of almost constant concentration on this one thing I wanted to receive from the invisible. I was so absorbed in that one thing that the crowds meant nothing to me. To get anything, wisdom, power, love, from silence, all interest must be absorbed in the subject. Your interest is like the diaphragm in a camera. It only receives impressions of that on which it is focused, and the camera must be held firmly in one position until the impression is received. The human camera receives impressions of the invisible in exactly the same way it receives impressions of the visible world. But it takes longer to receive a complete impression of the invisible, just as it takes longer to get a good negative in the dark. The invisible is darkness to us, so it often takes a long time to get a full impression of anything we wish to receive. In silence, a longer exposure is needed to get the impression. Concentration is simply the constant exposure of attention, of interest, on the thing we wish to realize in order to make it tangible. Now, the busy person, the person who is interested in 1,000 things, keeps his interest so busy taking snapshots that he has no time to get impressions of the invisible. His mind is constantly jumping from one thing to another. When he suddenly turns toward the invisible, he simply scans the darkness quickly and returns to earth without any impressions. Instead of a constant aspiration toward the ideal, there is a constant perspiration toward the real. Since there is nothing new under the sun, the only progress is made around and around the same old things. The only real relief from things as they are lies in the invisible. The only way to access relief is to concentrate on the invisible things. To do this, attention must be diverted from the visible things. The mind must be set on things above and remain so until the renewal is complete. People who are not yet satisfied that the visible world cannot satisfy and cannot see the need to enter into silence on set occasions. And there is another class who do not see the need for it, the class whose concentration on the invisible is so constant that material things assume the subordinate relationship. These are people who have obtained the truth by passing through great tribulations, who have traversed the gamut of things and found the principle behind things. And almost invariably, if not always, I have never heard of an exception, these are people who have tried almost every method of spiritual culture in existence, have practiced fasting and prayer, breathing exercises, negations and affirmations, treatments and concentrations of every conceivable kind. Martin Luther was one of them. And finally, when he had tried everything else and was crawling down the church steps, he found the truth. Immediately he got up and all his good works as useless, and began to praise and preach that not by works, but by faith, we are healed. 8 or 10 years ago, I heard Paul Milich, who had worked for years in all kinds of spiritual, mental and breathing exercises, repudiate it all as unnecessary. None of this stuff does you any good, he said, and others who have found the truth reiterate the same claim. And yet every one of them has found the truth through those very practices. If Martin Luther had stopped before crawling down those church steps, as his own searching spirit indicated, he would never have found the truth. If Milich, Shelton, Bernal, etc. had stopped one of their practices, they would still be searching. The spirit in every man commands him to do things and refrain from doing others in order to save himself from something or other. Is this universal urge just a lie? No, these concentration exercises are kindergarten methods by which we learn to use ourselves. When through practice we have learned, we discard the kindergarten methods. What was gained by conscious effort becomes habit. We become intuitive toward the invisible, whereas before we only came to it by conscious effort, by special practices. But why disown practices? Why tell others who are trying to learn that their efforts are futile? Through practices we find the way. Why discourage practice? There are people who are still wrapped up in the material. There are those who are involved in the invisible. None of these currently need set times to concentrate on the invisible, on the ideal side of life. But there is a third great middle class who are not absorbed in the already manifested world and who want to be one with the invisible world of causality. To these I say, follow the example of all adepts of all ages. Practice concentration. To all who want to achieve something, I say, enter into silence regularly to gain power and wisdom to achieve it. To those whose interest is mainly in the material world, but who want to understand and be deeply interested in the invisible world from which all things come, to those I say, enter into silence at regular intervals every day. To all mankind who yearn for something, I say, all things are in the silence. Be still and know. Chapter 7. The Spirit and the Individual. I was washing the breakfast dishes one morning when it occurred to me to go and visit a friend who lived several miles away. I finished my work and began to dress for my trip, when I was overcome with a feeling of depression, hopelessness, or sadness that I could not understand. I kept getting ready all the time, trying to reason that feeling away, but it wouldn't go away. Finally, I put on my hat, gloves and cloak and headed for the door, when a heaviness came over me and I backed into my room and sat down, saying, God, I want to know what the meaning of all this is. The answer came loud, clear and firm. Stay home. I stayed, and as I took off my hat, gloves and cloak, I felt so light that I seemed to walk on air. At that moment, I assumed that the voice, I call it a voice for lack of a more definite term, had told me to stay home because someone would be coming to me for help. This was my first year as a teacher and healer, but no one came that day or night. And the thought crossed my mind that maybe it was all nonsense after all, and I could have gone. Well, the result was that the train I would have taken met with a terrible accident in which many were killed or seriously injured. This is just one of many similar experiences I have had. I don't waste time in reasoning things out. The world has tried for 1900 years to follow reason, and look at the result. I follow my intuition, and it never fails me. Flora Pearl Howard. We must not belittle or deny one's reason. It is its highest glory, created to be used, but it is not all the wisdom to which a man has access, nor is it the greatest. The man who extols his understanding above the wisdom of the rest of creation and non-creation is a fool, and will surely end in disgrace. But he who rejoices in his personal understanding or reason as the means by which he accesses the source of all wisdom is on his way to benefit from his own intelligence and the universal intelligence. Moreover, everyone knows that foresight is not as good as hindsight. He has demonstrated this fact many times with many falls from his high horse. It really seems as if he may have learned at this time not to be so sure about his reason. After Mrs. Howard learned that the train on which she intended to ride had met with an accident, she saw clearly why it was unwise for her to take that particular train. Her reason had been enlightened, her hindsight honed. By universal intelligence, suppose New York City were to stand as the center of all wisdom. Suppose it were to say, "What I cannot reason about is not worth knowing." Suppose it continued to issue decrees to the whole world, but disregarded the messages received. What do you think would happen? It would collapse within a week. It is because of receiving all those messages about what is going on outside that she can reason out her business problems and send messages that move the world, exalting New York knowledge and reason and disregarding outside knowledge and reason would quickly ruin her. Intuition is the wireless line by which we receive instructions from all other stations in the universe. After Mrs. Howard had received and obeyed her message of the universal, a few days later she learned why she had been so directed. He who is full of his own concept is eternally despising his intuitions, following his old-fashioned reasons and getting into accidents. Then he wonders why he is treated so badly. You see, none of us have been down this road before. This day is a new day. This stretch of road has never been traveled before. No one can know for the reason what we are going to run into just ahead around the bend. You can make a rough guess, but you can't know. But there is something, whether you consciously know or not, what that will be around that corner. There is something that can and sends over the wireless line a message to stay away or to get closer, as the case may be. Now, Mrs. Howard was a woman who did not want to be in such a clash, and she believed that her intuitions would keep her away from them. Now, next to Mrs. Howard, there might have lived another woman as good as Mrs. Howard, so devoted to her intuitions, who received a message to go on that train at the very moment when Mrs. Howard's heart became heavy and she heard the message, "Stay home." This other woman's heart became light and she heard the message, "Go." So she set off cheerfully for the train. She climbed the steps, entered the carriage and walked past several empty seats before she felt the urge to sit down. She sat down and happily looked out the window. Eventually, as they sped along, there was a sudden crash and shouts and hisses of steam. Then there was work to be done. This neighbor of Mrs. Howard's, beyond a slight jolt from which she almost instantly recovered, was not injured at all. There were dead and dying in front of her and behind her, but she was safe. There was work to be done, and she was there to do it. You see, this woman was a physician and surgeon, and the only one on the train. She had spent years preparing for that job and believed that her intuitions would carry her strong and healthy into opportunities like this. So the message that depressed Mrs. Howard brought light to this woman's soul. Each received and interpreted the message according to her own particular character. What about the wounded and dead? They too were guided by the Spirit, each by his own self-constructed character. It related to their particular destiny. I would not be surprised if many of them did, filling the accident and crime columns of the daily newspapers. The man who thinks in terms of accident has a good chance of meeting it, but probably more of the victims. They were dragged in by their false religion. The man who thinks of himself, who really thinks of himself in his, who thinks of himself as a common worm and a great sinner who deserves a bad end, and yet is unrepentant, is daily more closely associated with all sorts of violent and horrible things. And everywhere and at all times, the violent man, the energetic man, no matter how good he may be, is preparing to be led into any catastrophe that suits him. There is no chance in our destinies. We receive just what we are prepared for. And throughout all ages, we have been preparing. And we still are. Whoever is not busy preparing for the best is relating to the least good. Whoever prepares to die with his boots on will die that way. Whoever prepares for accidents will die in an accident. Whoever prepares for life may never see death again. When bubonic plague is about to appear in a place, all the birds fly away. Who warned them? Oh, that was just instinct, a common thing we wise beings never use. Before Mount Pele spat destruction, all the wild animals, none of which could have had any personal knowledge or any record of the science of volcanoes, fled from the vicinity. The domestic animals groaned and huddled, and those that could ran far away. Then the hearts of the people began to sink, and all souls heard the message, "Go away." Then there was a hasty preparation for a quick exodus, but not the wise, educated and sensible men put their heads together, and they decided that they would not be, and that the others would not be guided by something as common as instinct or by their own sinking hearts. No, though their hearts would fall into their shoes, and their knees would tremble, and their teeth would chatter, they would be sensible. They would use their divine reason. They would. Mount Pele had never destroyed them before, and it would not do so now. So the wise reasoners locked up the poor fools, and they were well locked up. Only one escaped. Now, exactly what that spirit is like that tries to guide us into all truth is something I do not know, but I know that there is a spirit that pervades and would like to save all creatures from harm, both by intuition, the witness of the spirit with my spirit, and by actual and repeated experiences of both kinds. I have been guided by spirit into paths of pleasure, peace and abundance, and before that, contempt for all kinds of trouble. And I have a theory, based on spirit's testimony with mine, about what this spirit is and how it acts. Spirit is the universal intelligence that fills this universe, so full that there is no room for anything else. There are only little eddies and currents and countercurrents in this great ocean of intelligence, and you are one eddy in it, and I am another, and each of us creates little eddies and currents that move us and move other things toward us, and when a leaf floats by, it is drawn into our eddy. But when we swirl next to a rock, the rock does not move, and neither do we. We are not related to the rock. When gold is placed next to a horseshoe magnet, it stays still. The magnet and the gold are not interested in each other, but that does not prove that the magnet is stupid and dead. There is no great current of longing in that magnet. If it had means of locomotion, it would travel the world searching, perhaps never knowing exactly what it is searching for, but still searching. And in time, it would begin to feel a definite inclination to go in a certain direction. Now, if he is just a dumb magnet with no great pride in his brain, he will follow that definite inclination, and as he travels, the power of attraction will grow, and he will travel faster. And lo, it will fly into the arms of its affinity. A steel bar will cling, and the bar will cling, and joy will be born. It takes two and an exchange of intelligence for joy to be born. Or maybe our magnet will stay home and yearn until it attracts steel filings to itself. This is not as fantastic as you may suppose. All things are intelligent. All things are exerting their little compulsions upon all creation for satisfaction, and in due time all compulsions will be satisfied. The great sea is boiling with intelligence, and the affinities are coming together. It is the attraction of magnet to steel that constitutes what I call spirit. That attraction is intelligence. Sit down, be still, ask what your feelings mean, and then do what they say. This is what Mrs. Howard did when she wasn't sure what her feelings meant. Reverend Robert Horton tells a story about a miraculous answer to prayer. He was in Norway with a group of tourists exploring a wild and swampy area. One of the women lost one of her galoshes, and the overlay couldn't be replaced until they got to Bergen at the end of their tour. They also couldn't explore that wilderness area without rubber boots, so the galoshes had to be found. As you might expect, everyone in the group worked hard to find the lost rubber. They looked in all the miles of meadows and mountain slopes they had hiked. Eventually they gave up and went back to the hotel. But in the afternoon, Dr. Horton had an idea. Why not pray to find the shoe? He did, and they paddled back down the fjord to the morning landing. He got off and walked straight for the galoshes, in a place he was sure he had searched many times before. When I was cycling with 3 other people, we were on a sandy road outside of town. Two of them were pedaling in tandem ahead of us on a downhill slope when a rivet flew off and the chain came off. The tandem kept rolling for a quarter of a mile downhill and stopped on the next climb, so our friends were able to descend without getting hurt. By this time, we had caught up to them and learned for the first time why they had stopped. Of course, our first thought was, "Oh, we'll never be able to find that little grey rivet in all this grey dust." The other bikes probably went over it, and the house is 3 miles away. But we all retraced our steps, searching diligently. Two of the group are excellent rifle shooters with very keen eyesight. I thought one of these two might find the rivet, but we all walked slowly back, far beyond the point where they realized their loss, and no one saw the rivet. Then it occurred to me that the High Spirit had not been called to our aid. I immediately said to myself, "Spirit, you know where the rivet is. Please show it to me." I thought of spirit as the law of love or attraction, which is the principle of all creation, and instantly the idea arose that the little rivet could attract the eye's attention if the eye was willing to be attracted. These words floated into my mind: rivet, rivet, rivet my eye. By this time I had fallen behind the others, so I walked quietly, calmly along, eyes willing, and those words kept repeating over and over in my mind, and the rivet drew my eye. I, who considered myself very slow of sight, found the rivet, and I know it was because I turned to the universal being, to God, to the law of attraction, for the help needed for the knowledge which none of us had in consciousness, but which was certainly present in the universal mind in which we live and move and exist. Just the other day, I had a little experience that illustrates the idea that man's dire need is God's opportunity. For years I have said that I can never find ready-to-wear clothes that fit me. I have tried many times, the waist's always too short and narrow in front, the sleeves tight. But I keep trying every year, because everything is evolving, you know, even clothes and tailors. I wanted a new white lawn cloth shirt and wondered if I couldn't find one ready to wear. I tried the biggest suit store in Springfield, no good. Then one day I had an impulse to try the best places in Holyoke, 1 or 2 almost, but nothing that did the trick. I gave it up. Then I had another impulse to try a store I've always said. I never found anything there that I wanted. I almost passed the store by, saying to myself, "There's no use trying there, and anyway, it's too late." But the thought arose, or rather, the impression, that the Spirit was urging me on, and I had better go. "We'll see if it's the Spirit," I said to myself. I think it is. It was. I found the shirt I wanted, and besides, I found a nice white lawn suit in the most unlikely corner of the vicinity, according to my judgment and experience. There is a little law here that I want you to notice. The Spirit guides us through impressions or attractions and is limited in its revelations by our mental makeup, which is the conscious and dominant part of us. Why didn't the Spirit impress me in the first place to go to that store where that shirt and dress had been waiting for me since spring, and I had wanted them since spring? The Spirit did impress me about it, but when the Spirit said shirt, I said, Springfield. If they don't have a fit there, they won't have it anywhere, and anyway, I know I'll never find it. But I tried without faith. That fell to the Spirit for the moment. But at the first opportunity, on the first evening when I wasn't too busy even to think about such things, the Spirit whispered shirt to me again, and I didn't let the Spirit go any further with its impressions. Instead of asking the Spirit where to buy a shirt, I said, "Oh yes, shirt. I'll go to that store where I usually find other things I like." As you can see, my mind's routine, fixed ideas, once again solved the issue. When I gave up looking for something in these places and walked right past the door of the other store, the Spirit had a chance to speak to me and even whisper its name. It used this chance to get me to think of that place, despite my biases. The mind was open to the idea of the shirt, but it was well shut against the thought of that store, or at least the straight mental path to that store was shut. So the spirit had to lead me around by using brain links in the back alleys. The straight road is now open, though. I always have a great time shopping with spirit, and the straight mental routes are open almost all the time. I never waste much time, and I always find what I'm looking for, often at a great price, even though I almost never read the newspaper ads for deals. Many times, though, I've gone into a store to buy something and found that item on sale for a very low price. Do you think these are really small things to worry about for the spirit? I don't. The spirit knows everything, has all the power, and is everywhere. Its main goal and joy is to lead people in the right direction. In every area of life, the spirit is like a universal watchman who can untie the knots between supply and demand. I think someone is careless or stupid who doesn't look to it for help in every situation, not paying attention to the spirit, even though I have this thought, because I believe I know where to go to get a shirt. It's easy to forget that the store of life is always growing and shifting, so we can always ask the spirit to save us time, money, and trouble by not going in circles. Here is the key to all of our little experiences, where it seems like our spirit guides were wrong and our prayers, longings, and wishes went unmet. The spirit never lets us down. It's us who get tired of following it. It's up to us to find our own mental ways to the goal. In this case, it's about making new roads in to get rid of our rocky attitudes and stop the spirit from leading us down such winding roads. We need to master our minds. This way, we won't have to go around them. This time, the spirit helps us again. Once the spirit was able to get me past all my biases and into that tent, I got rid of those biases. That's a straight line in your mind now, in places where it wasn't there before. When spirit tells me to walk, it can take me right where it wants to go. Yes, spirit does amazing things in strange ways. It seems mysterious to us until we are shown the right way to go. Then, it's so simple and easy that we can hardly believe the spirit would do it. Yes, it does. The spirit is interested in everything, no matter how big or small. If we believe, we deserve. And when we don't believe, the spirit is still and quiet. The spirit is the life-giving breath. My healer tells me that I can only trust the spirit, that breathing movements, food, sunshine, and air shouldn't be what you count on to stay healthy. He says, "Why can't you avoid breathing? That is sheer nonsense. Sunlight and air are spirit, and the plain truth is that if you don't use them, all your dependence on spirit will be of absolutely no use. Try living in a room in the north with the windows closed and you will see you cannot help breathing, but your breathing is of no use, unless by it you inhale good living spirit in the form of pure air and sunlight. If we all lived under the sun and slept under the stars, that healer's advice might be good enough, but we do not. We live in closed, dark rooms from which the spirit of life has fled, leaving only its outpouring. You can't help but breathe. But what do we breathe? We breathe the dead air of closed rooms. The spirit is life, and we live by breathing. It is clumsy to depend on the spirit when you don't, when you shut yourself away from the spirit of life and breathe death. Pure air and sunlight are spirits specially prepared for your use. What is the use of pretending to depend on spirit when you shut yourself up in rooms from which spirit has fled? If you live in locked rooms, you may assert your dependence on spirit until you are black in the face, and you may be treated every hour of the day by this healer and 10 more like him, and the result will be only sickness and death. I know in my heart and soul and mind that this is true, and I have seen the truth of it demonstrated by hundreds of cases of people who did not recover by treatments of any kind, and then did recover by sunlight, fresh air, and full breathing, together with mental treatment. The gospel of fresh air is more necessary for human beings than even the gospel of new thinking. If we understood and applied the gospel of fresh air, we would think correctly without effort. It is in dark and airless corners that evil thoughts breed, because the spirit of life is not present there in a form that can be appropriated by human beings. There they receive the breath of death and generate thoughts of the same nature, distorted thoughts of death, evil, and despair. Come to the sun and breathe in the breath of life that generates in you the new thought of life, love, wisdom, truth, health, happiness, success. The new thought will not save you unless you live it, and a little observation and experimentation will show you that you cannot live it without breathing in plenty of fresh air. If everything is spirit, why does this healer tell you that to regulate your breathing, exercise, food, etc., is to depend upon something outside of spirit? The truth of the matter is this: he does not realize that everything is spirit. He is still entangled with good and bad spirit, and not spirit, God, and does not see spirit in everything and everything in spirit. So he puts the "don't step on the grass" sign where he doesn't see spirit. This won't stop him from pointing you to spirit where he recognizes it. None of us are wise enough to always see God in all his works. It is the spirit that makes us breathe. When we shut ourselves away from the pure breath of life, we shut the door to the power that makes us breathe. And when we are too much interested in doing indoor work, the spirit finds it hard enough to make us breathe enough to keep us in good condition. To grow, closed rooms and sedentary work frustrate the spirit's will to make us breathe. So, by working against the spirit, we form the habit of breathing too little, depriving it of the taxes it needs. So we set to work with the spirit of life. We open the window and let in the spirit of life. We go out into the open air and rejoice in the spirit of the sun. We run and jump to make ourselves inhale the spirit of life. Being too busy to spend hours every day outdoors, we do acrobatic stunts in our camisoles to make ourselves draw in more of the spirit of life. And always, night and day, winter and summer, we strive to leave our windows wide open so that the spirit of life does not depart from us for a single moment. We are learning to depend totally on the spirit. We used to remember the spirit only on the Sabbath. Now we remember it every day and all night. We remember to breathe it, to eat it, as well as to think it, and we are truly blessed. Chapter 10. Affirmation and Wheels. Mere repetition of affirmations such as "I am successful" will do little good. One must think of that which he desires and must put his shoulder to the wheel. But the person who is filled with the sense of failure and defeat is more likely than not to put his shoulder on the wrong side of the wheel. He is so discouraged, worried and distracted that he thinks it doesn't matter much where he puts his shoulder. The thing won't move anyway. So she stupidly moves forward, working with her shoulder in the same place as always, the wrong place. But let that man make up his mind that there is a way to move that wheel, and he will find it. And you will see things move. That man will circle the wagon once or twice, look at the lay of the land, encourage his horses to be in a good mood, maybe get them to back up a little, say a cheery "G up," and he'll put his shoulder in the right place at the right time, and they'll get going. Or another team will pass by just at the right time to give him a boost. The man who believes himself equal to any emergency that arises will be strong mentally and physically. His mind will be alert, full of resources. Instead of pushing like a blind mule at a single point until he falls down exhausted, he will use his wits and find another way. Conjure up some lever of some kind to move that load. If he can't do it alone, someone else will come along just in time to give him the push he needs. He believes he will make it somehow, and he does. The man who says, "I'm a failure," will never have anyone arrive just in time. "It's just my bad luck," he laments. And if he keeps putting his shoulder to the wrong part of the wheel, or pulling desperately and half-heartedly, or with an inner rage that consumes more energy than effort, he keeps going until he has to give up for the time being. Affirming "I am successful" will not pull the load out of the mire, except insofar as it awakens energy for intelligent effort. All affirmations and going into silence are helpful in awakening mental and physical energy for intelligent action. All chronic failures are so because they believe in failure and opposition, and malicious animal magnetism and generalized negativity. This belief in failure fills the individual with an affinity for undesirable things. The infallible cure, the only cure for failure, is the belief in success, the belief in one's own power to turn even defeat to good advantage. The man who does not know when he is beaten will never be beaten. The dunce who did not know he was a dunce made it to the top, while the dunce who knew he was a dunce remained in the class of pig-worshipping dunces. He once crossed the continent on foot because he had no money to pay for his journey. After arriving at his destination, he said he saw on his walk hundreds of places where he could have started penniless and over time accumulated piles of money or opportunities just crying out to be developed. Only the thought of an even better opportunity down the road kept him from stopping at the first city on his route. But that boy had success in him, and he was alert to opportunity. He believed in himself and the world. Failure only believes in bad luck, and his eye is looking for easy jobs that he is sure he will never have a chance to get. When a man is looking for and defeats, he finds them, as a man thinks in his heart, so is he. That does not mean that a man can make some claims of success or profess a new thought and immediately become a success. Man's heart is the emotional center of his habits or instinct, the center from which his instincts, his habits, radiate, as the nerves radiate from the solar plexus. Instincts are thoughts of habit, thoughts of the heart, and every instinct came into existence through conscious thought and effort. Follow your inner experiences as you learn to play the piano, and you will get a clear idea of how instinct arises. At first, your fingers are stiff, and every movement is voluntary. Every movement has to be thought out. But gradually you get into the habit of handling your fingers in a certain way. Gradually you stop thinking about your finger movements at all. You do them instinctively. In other words, you have trained your heart, your subconscious mind, to do the thinking for you. From now on, instead of consciously thinking about your finger movements, you think about them in your heart, that is, subconsciously. Psychologists say that no more than 5% of our mental processes are conscious. The remaining 95% is under consciousness. This means that at least 95% of our thoughts are habit thoughts or instinctive thoughts. It is this instinctive part of us, this 95% of us, that is referred to in the Bible as the heart. Now, if this heart of ours carries at least 99% of our mentality, you can easily see why a man is what he thinks in his heart, and you can see why a few affirmations of success, or even many of them, will not change a man enough to make any great difference in his environment. And you can see why a mere intellectual conception of a new thought is not enough to change him and his environment. Man is a magnet. At least 95% of him is habit mind. Therefore, most of his environment comes to him through his affinity with his 95% habit or instinct mind, his subconscious mind, the workings of which are practically unconscious to him. So it is no wonder that he often says, "I don't see why this unwanted thing should come to me." He cannot see why it comes, because he is practically unconscious of that great 95% of his thinking that attracts them. He knows that he does not consciously desire these unpleasant things, and can hardly conceive of the fact that he is only conscious of about 5% of his thoughts and desires. And he is furthermore reluctant to recognize that most of himself has no more sense than to attract such things to himself. He is most complacent when he blames the environment or evil people or malicious animal magnetism or a God who punishes the one he loves or a fate that got loose from God's guiding ropes and goes around angrily annoying good people. Man is a magnet, and every line, dot, and detail of his experiences come by his own attraction. As a man thinks in his heart, so is he. The preponderance of attraction comes through the instinctive self, the heart, and there is no sense in trying to fight or run away from the things that come to us. We only hurt ourselves by fighting, and to run away from the things we have attracted is to run into the arms of similar or worse conditions. We have to take ourselves with us. The only way to change conditions effectively is to change the heart, the mind of habit or instinct. This can be done with more or less ease according to the degree of character established and the degree of will and enthusiasm applied. The key to all change of character lies in that small 5% of conscious mind, which with all its smallness is a sure lever to move the 95% of powerful beneath it. For conscious thought is positive, dynamic thought, while subconscious thought is negative, receptive. That little 5% mind has a power of comprehension stronger than several times its volume of subconscious mind, and there is not an atom of all that 95% subconscious mind that cannot be moved by that little 5% mind that lies at the top. The conscious self is the directing power, just as it directed your fingers to change its fixed habits, so it can direct any change in other lines of mental or bodily habit by directing a persistent and silent practice along the desired lines. Insist on consciously thinking right thoughts, and in due time you cannot but have right subconscious thoughts. Thinking good, peace, love, self-control, self-reliance, self-confidence, success, lasted long and faithfully, will fill even the most settled heart with habits of good, peace, love, self-control, self-reliance, self-confidence, success. And to the extent that the heart is filled with such habits, the environment and experiences will change to match them. How long will it take to transform you thus by the renewal of your whole mind? It all depends on you. If your practice is intermittent and half-hearted, it may take another incarnation or two. If you do it with a steady will, eliminating all distractions that weaken your will and enthusiasm, practicing faithfully and diligently the new habits of mind, you can make the desired change in, say, half a lifetime or less. And if you can bring to your aid a high spiritual exaltation and faith, you can make the change in almost no time at all, for spiritual exaltation and faith and enthusiasm will literally melt the hardest heart and permit rapid formation. This is the secret of rapid achievement in children. Their hearts are clean and melted in the emotional fires of enthusiasm and faith, ready to receive deep and lasting impressions for the reason that we adults have cooled and even extinguished the heart fires of faith and enthusiasm. So it takes time and repetition to reform. This is the secret of miracles. Enthusiasm and religious exaltation are similar to the fires of youth. They melt the heart to receive higher impressions. The rationalist must receive his new impressions by meticulous hammering. Repetition and time will do for him what religious or youthful enthusiasm does quickly for children and fools. Affirmations alone will not do the work of putting your shoulder to the wheel when the load has stopped, but they will transform you heart and conscience so that you will bring better horses as well as better wheels, more friendly roads appearing in the time of need. And affirmations of the right kind will awaken your ingenuity so that you don't overtax your horses or your personal energies to the point of needing a shoulder on the wheel. Success is the natural result of intelligent direction of effort. Affirmations of success, faith, wisdom, power, good, love will awaken your latent forces to more intelligent uses. The more enthusiasm you can conjure up in affirmations, the more quickly you will realize success. Chapter 11. Your strengths and how to manage them. You can exaggerate anything, even self-treatment. If you keep repeating affirmations to yourself, Your mental chatter interferes with true healing. It is not the conscious mind that heals you, it is the subconscious or soul mind and the superconscious or supersoul mind. Your soul expression is guided and directed by your conscious mind. A mental affirmation is simply a word of direction to your soul mind. The soul listens to your statements and then builds accordingly. But what if you called your maidservants and told them over and over again exactly what you wanted them to do and how to do it? If you spent all your time repeating your instructions, when would you get the job done, and wouldn't your instructions be confused? Also, of course, you don't do it that way. Of course not if you are a wise housewife. You call your maids and tell them quietly and politely, and in as few words as possible, exactly what you want done. Then they go cheerfully out of your presence and do their best to please you. If later you find something that was not done right, you call a maid and repeat your instructions, perhaps with a slightly more detailed explanation. Then you leave again and trust her to get it right this time. What would happen if you followed your maids and tried to observe, criticize, and direct their every move? Why, they would get nervous and make silly mistakes, and you would all give up in despair. And what if you directed them to do a certain difficult job and then came back 5 minutes later expecting to find everything done? Oh, you can't imagine you would do such foolish things. You may not do it with your maidservants, but you evidently do it with yourself. Your everyday objective consciousness is the owner or master of your being. Psychologists say that objective mental activities are no more than 1/20th of all your mental activities. That means that the mastermind has the equivalent of at least 20 servants. Under its direction, these handmaids belong to the subjective mind or soul of you. Then there is the great supersoul, of which your individual soul is but an atom whose every demand is heard. That means that your little mastermind not only has at its disposal the equivalent of at least 20 subconscious servants, but it also has at its disposal the equivalent of 10 trillion other helpers of the infinite supersoul. And all the mind has to do is say the word. All these helpers fly in to do its bidding. You may think that all these helpers don't fly to do your will, but they do. The only problem is you, that you don't give your helpers time and opportunity to work on your desires. You keep repeating your instructions over and over again, and you keep trying to follow your 20 or more handmaids to see if they are doing the things you want done. You watch them in your stomach, your liver and your lungs, always worried for fear that they will go wrong. No wonder you get nervous, restless and tense all over. No wonder your feelings are no better than they were. Make your affirmations of health, happiness and success at regular intervals, say 2 or 3 times a day, or make them at times when you cannot take your mind off your conditions. Make the statements clearly and positively, then take your mind completely off the subject and give your soul and supersoul a chance to work. Take your feelings lightly and seek to interest yourself in some good work. Take it for granted that your whole being and all creation besides is working for you in the things you desire. Rest easy and trust yourself. Don't let your mind label your feelings and symptoms. Give it plenty of useful work and plenty of play and plenty of rest. While your soul works things out for you as fast as it can, be as interested and happy as you can while the soul is working. Have fun and be glad, say the word, and then be happy, and do not allow yourself to doubt that the soul will do the work. This is the secret of quick healing. The closer you can be to keeping your mind pleasantly occupied between times when you give yourself special treatments and affirmations, the more quickly you will realize mental, bodily, and environmental health, as well as soul health. Your faith in your soul and supersoul will have made you whole. The distrustful mind is a terrible meddler and creator of discord, and the idle mind, the mind that is not directed to useful purposes, is always a distrustful meddler. Moral: take an interest in some good work. Chapter 12. Duty and Love. Even if you work to exhaustion and have no love for it hardly benefits you and your employer less than it should. Duty work deprives the doer of the joy of doing, which is the main compensation of all work. You imagine that you do your work well out of a sense of duty. You would do it even better if you loved it. If you loved it, you would enjoy every part of it and glory in every little improvement you discovered, and you would discover many because your soul would be playing through your fingers. The soul of the doer by duty is estranged from his work. He works with his fingers and his mind of habit only, and by the end of the week he is worn out and his poor soul withers for lack of exercise. Then, perhaps, he takes it to church for relief and carefully closes it again before Monday morning. And the worst of it is that so many people make a virtue of keeping their souls locked up 6 days out of 7, exhibit duty as their chief motive, and even when they let a little soul, a little love and joy into their work, they do not recognize it. They insist that it is duty that drives them. When the soul manages to come out of its shell and express itself in useful work, the brain denies it the glory and happiness that belong to it. The worker resolutely quenches the vibrations of joy with that stern word, duty. He deprives himself of the pleasure of his honest effort. There are 2 ways of depriving oneself of the joy of work. One is to paralyze joy with duty. The other is to scatter the mind and soul all over creation while the hands are doing something. In the first case, the soul is locked up in idleness. In the second, it is wasted in disordered thoughts. The power of the soul is emotion, that which flows from the silence within. The nature of emotion is movement. To let emotion flow through the body into intelligent effort is joy and eternally springing life, strength and wisdom. To let the mind wander while the hands work is to waste your soul's strength. At the top of the head, the power that should move from the head down through the body and out into intelligent doing simply dissipates into thin air. The wandering mind robs the body of vitality and joy. It is the prodigal that wastes all your sustenance. The doer by duty is a miser. He lets some of his soul into his work, locking the rest well inside. He puts his thought into his work, but is stingy with his soul. His love works coldly, solidly, conscientiously, reminding him of things. The doer by duty cuts off his soul heat, and his body becomes thin and pinched, his cerebrals rigid, his thoughts angular. He shuts off the inspiration of love and joy, and works like a machine, producing the same old things according to the same old pattern. The doer by duty turns a real, living, growing, loving being into a mere cold machine. It is a shame, and the whole cause is the old parental tradition that duty is greater than love. I wonder, where did they get that idea? The same spirit guided them that guides us. That same spirit must have led them and us to do for duty. Why? To gain self-control, so that we might have greater joy. That is, first there's the natural animal way of doing things, just going with the impulse and gratifying yourself no matter what the cost to others. But somehow you're not very happy after you do it. Then there is the such way of doing things, the way of duty, when we cut off all the old natural impulses and teach ourselves to work solidly, steadily in the right direction. It takes almost all our thought and effort to control ourselves. This mental way requires a firm and unrelenting hand over our impulses, but we were not happy when it did not. So we kept crushing the old natural impulses and adhering to animal impulses to have things our way, rightly or wrongly, regardless of the other. We were always tempted by the hope of joy, and when we got what we wanted, as sometimes happened, it was only to be disappointed. So we were filled with restlessness. Since we have chosen the ways of duty, there are no joys to tempt us, but peace accompanies us. In the old way, we were always sure that we would be happy. In the way of duty, we have ceased to expect happiness, but we really have peace and a peace of heart. We have learned from sad experience. It is worth 2 joys in the hand. We have been bitten many times, and so we have learned caution. So we continue to educate ourselves to keep the peace and close eyes and ears to promises of pleasure. We have learned to follow conscience rather than natural impulse. Conscience is simply spiritual caution. The faculty called caution warns us of external dangers. It was created by many centuries of experience in race, by burning fingers and receiving blows on the shins and blows on the head. Conscience warns us of inner dangers and is being created by many centuries of human experience by robbing another, only to discover that your own heart is robbed of peace and happiness. We taste the impulse, and we find it sweet at first, and bitter at the end. Then we taste duty, and find that its first sharpness melts into a clean sweetness, such as we have never tasted before. A sweetness so pure and satisfying that it is no wonder we continue to cling to doing for duty's sake. Who brought it? When we lived only on uncontrolled and unguided impulses, we were often happy on the surface, when by chance we got the things asked for, but we were always restless and unsatisfied within. This restlessness is the voice of the universal spirit within that always arises us to take our mastery over self and direct our energies to higher and still higher uses. It is the voice of life that always demands a higher purpose for being and doing. The spirit of the world that moves us allows each of us a few years and many intervals of irresponsible living. We have our childhood when everyone smiles and rushes to satisfy every impulse, and when we are good children, we have our little vacations and play happily with that sweet taste in our hearts. If we try to take too many moments of play, the spirit within us is frowning, and again restless, it always urges us to get up and do what will help the spirit of the world to express the beauties it has in mind for us. When we stop chasing pleasure and begin to live and do according to the plan set in our hearts, the spirit of the world whispers to us, "Well done." We find peace. We taste and see that it is good. From now on, we work for inner peace, not for the passing gratification of the outer senses. As we follow duty, peace deepens and broadens over time. We form the habit of duty, and it becomes easier and easier to do what seems best, because we have learned that to do otherwise disturbs our peace. And we have learned to love that peace more than anything else life can offer us. The peace continues to deepen and broaden and grow more dynamic. At first, it is a solemn calm, and a little deviation from duty disturbs and dissipates it. But in time, as we continue to do our duty through this solemn calm, ever deepening and widening, the full diapason of deep joy arises. Very gently at first, with many diminuendos and silences at unexpected moments, it swells again over little things that the tide of life has brought us. Things we loved and thought we had given up forever when we chose duty as our guide. Intermittently at first, deep joy gushes intermittently and softly, but oh, so full and sweet and satisfying, such tones as our souls never heard before. We marveled at the deep joy, and oh, we began to see that the spirit of the world was urging us to duty only that we might find a deeper joy than the former irresponsible life could offer us. By taking mastery over self, by using our energies for higher purposes, we have deepened our capacity for joy. Now, the harmony of deep joy begins to swell, and every touch of life only adds hymns of praise, and the good things of life begin to come: houses, lands, fathers, mothers, brothers. Times more than ever before, bringing joy as never before. Oh, we thought we had given up the pleasures of life for its duties, and lo and behold, we find the pleasures added. We used to be fascinated and shaken by the pleasures of life. Now we find them fascinated and obedient to us. Oh, the power and the glory and the joy of it! We gain mastery over ourselves and our environment through doing our duty. We renounce the short-sighted impulsive will to follow the omniscient will that is working through us. And lo, the things we once vainly desired are now ours to command and enjoy. No wonder we praise duty, but duty is a teacher whose work we need not forever when we have made its wisdom our surpass. Duty flourishes in love. The more resolution and persistence we put into the doing of duty, the sooner we shall overcome it. The more pleasure we can derive from the doing of duty, the sooner we shall overcome it. When the worker puts his soul into his duty, duty is absorbed in love and joy grows. Many duty workers deprive themselves of the joy that is their due and hinder the growth of their joy and of themselves by simply denying that they work out of anything more than a sense of duty. As long as our best actions are called duty, they answer the call as cold, hard duty. As soon as those same activities are called pleasures, our joy, love and soul are turned toward them, and the worker is transfigured. He who calls his work duty encloses his soul away from his body and his work. Your soul is love, and love has no affinity for duty. So as long as you insist on working out of a sense of duty, you shut away from your work the feeling of love. Thus you deprive yourself of the joy of doing, and this means that you deprive yourself of most of your power and wisdom. To do, love is the essence of all wisdom, imagination and inspiration, as well as of power. To cling strictly to duty is to shut out love, and with it the wisdom, inspiration and imagination needed to improve your work. You deprive yourself of the joy of doing, and your work is deprived of its greatest beauty and usefulness. Stop calling your duties by that name. Have fun doing it, for the love of it. You don't know how you can amuse a child to do things. You have not been amused yourself until at last you laughed and forgave and did what you had resolved not to do. You haven't seen dozens of your friends be amused into doing things. Of course, all nature responds to smiling good humor, and your soul, your love, will respond. To the same well-meaning good humor will come out and smile in your actions, radiate soul glow, joy, power and inspiration through you and down through your fingers into your work and out into your aura and out into the whole world. Smile and rise higher than the class of duty. The class of joy awaits you. Chapter 13. Well done. The man who possesses an indescribable aversion to becoming a paid employee and prefers to live at the expense of his friends instead of earning an honest living will never succeed, even in speculation. Such a man could not generate a desire strong enough to attract fortune. Even at a gambling table, it takes character to generate a desire of the kind that moves things. It takes firmness of purpose, positive determination, and character. Purpose, determination are never found in the parasite. If he had character, he would choose any kind of honest work that would enable him to remain independent. His indescribable aversion to becoming a paid employee would be nothing compared to his distaste for living at the expense of others, even temporarily. Character is the result of unwavering self-respect and self-reliance. A man's character is what distinguishes him from a jellyfish, which takes the form of whatever environment it presents itself. It is something that keeps him standing on his own 2 feet, no matter what. Character is the backbone and mental muscle and is subject to the same laws of development and growth as other bones and muscles. Bones, muscles and character do not grow by bread alone, but by use. Character grows by the use of self-confidence and self-respect, just as physical character grows by the use of muscles. Character weakens and becomes flabby when self-confidence and self-respect are kept on another man's pantry shelf. Character is developed by exercise. How is he supposed to exercise except by doing things? How is he supposed to do things when someone else is doing them for him? The first thing a man of character, self-respect and self-reliance would do in such circumstances as MT describes would be to overcome his indescribable aversion to anything that would help him continue to live with self-respect and self-reliance. In fact, the only indescribable aversion a man of true character has is the indescribable aversion to depending on anyone other than himself. A person whose aversion to becoming gainfully employed is greater than his aversion to idleness and to living at the expense of others is simply a massive concession to public opinion. He hates gainful employment because he thinks his neighbors will despise him. Such a man cares for appearances above all things. He cares for the outside of things as a jellyfish does. He looks first for a pleasant resting place as the jellyfish does, and will sacrifice the last vestige of self-respect, self-confidence and character for that fetish. The outward appearance thinks it seems better to live at the expense of his friends than to soil his hands to take care of himself. But if he had real character of his own, if he had a backbone and mental muscles worthy of the name, he simply could not stoop and grovel like a dependent, a beggar. It would have to go out and express itself somehow in some independent activity or die. For character is a deep life impulse that will push its way to expression through any condition. It simply cannot continue to sit supinely by another man's home or wait by the roadside with hat outstretched to collect loose change from passers-by. Character must act, or character must express itself or expire. Character is to the individual what the channel is to the river. Remove the banks that confine the stream and direct it, and the water gushes forth in an endlessly muddy swamp. The inner character of a man confines and directs the life force, the force of desire. The stronger the character, the deeper and wider will be the course of desire or life, and the more positively will a man express himself in self-respecting independence. The stronger the character, the greater will. Be the man's indescribable aversion to depend upon anyone but himself, and so deep and strong are his desires, as they flow through the clearly defined channels of character, that they force new paths through any circumstance. Such a man's desires flow deeply and strongly enough to carry things in his favor, but the man without a strong character is simply a muddy swamp of sentimentality. He is incapable of anything but overwhelming desires. His current of desire, having no solid banks, simply overwhelms the whole surface of things, with no depth to work its way through the environment. His energy of desire is dispersed and wasted in mere superficial longings unworthy of the name of desire. So man splashes about in his own swamp of sensibility and gets nowhere. Herein lies the reason why the MT man will not find success at the gaming table or anywhere else, except by gradually building up a character strong enough to find his way to the good things he desires. The first step toward success is to decide that it is yours and that all creation is ready to help you manifest it. The next step is to work with the world, taking whatever job the world gives you with full confidence that the world will promote you as fast as you demonstrate your aptitude for promotion. Demonstrating your aptitude for promotion involves doing the best you can with whatever job the world gives you, and at the same time using your spare time and thought to prepare for a better one. Doing one of these things is not enough. The man who does his job exceptionally well will continue to do that same kind of work until the day of reckoning, unless he shows an aptitude for doing a more valuable job. The world is always anxiously looking for men who can fill more difficult positions, is always trying to tempt people into higher and better paying positions, and the man who is faithful and efficient in one place and shows the slightest aptitude for more valuable work is always the first to have a chance for promotion. The man who thinks he is gone is right, but he is either suppressed by himself, alone, or he is careless, inefficient, uninterested, uncunning in his present work, or is not preparing himself for something better. Abe Lincoln split rails all day, split them with vigor and intelligence, but at night he studied books by the light of a pine knot, all the way from splitting rails to the presidency. He found time outside of business hours to inform himself on subjects beyond his job. The main difference between Lincoln and Abe Johnson lies in the way they spend their hours after work. Abe Johnson also works with vigor and intelligence, and he's never had to split rails for a living. He's an excellent accountant. He's been in the same store at about the same salary for 65 years, and almost every noon and every night for 65 years he's sat on a sugar barrel in the store and discussed politics and economics. And very often he has complained to his friends about his lack of opportunity to move up in the world. Here in a Massachusetts town, they've been having labor problems for a long time. Cotton mill owners say the plain cotton fabric business has plummeted and they simply must cut wages or close down. There is little demand for the type of plain cotton fabrics made. In these mills, the mill workers say they can't live with lower wages and won't, period. So one strike follows another, or a lockout. For months, the factories sit idle while the owners and workers are at a stalemate. Someone suggested that the mills start making the kind of fashionable cotton fabrics for which there is a growing demand, but the weavers refused to learn the new fabrics. They said they knew how to make the plain weave and would not be paid to learn the new type of weaving at the old wages. That they are paid according to the amount of work done, and many of them said they were too old to make such changes anyway. So these faithful and efficient weavers continue to struggle and strike and curse doom instead of preparing for a new job that would ultimately pay better than the old one. Poor short-eyed weavers, poor cousins of the weavers, poor short-sighted and disappointed Abe Johnson. What do you think life makes us start at the bottom and build little by little for? Solely for the purpose of building character, building good, strong channels for desire to run in, channels so deep and full that the current of desire is strong enough to accomplish for the individual what he wants. And how will we know that we are building the right kind of character? By the sense of inner satisfaction that attests to every action well done. That's where self-respect and self-confidence come in. Even a baby feels his soul's well done when he succeeds in doing something for himself. A child values this inner satisfaction, this self-respect, above all things. Observe the happy expression on a child's face when he has succeeded in doing something for himself. Only foolish adults value anything on earth above this inner satisfaction. Only adults will let other people do for them what they can do for themselves. Only adults will put out their own light for the sake of appearances. Some adults, to know yourself is to know that the best thing in heaven or on earth, the best guide in heaven or on earth, is the inner sense of well done, the sense of self-respect that comes from doing things rather than letting them be done for you. As long as the inner self approves of your actions, you are building character. And what good will it do for you to gain the whole world and lose the well done of your soul? Nothing less than nothing, because in all creation or uncreation there is only one real satisfaction, one real happiness, and that is self-graph, self-respect. Self-graph only arises from doing things well. It is the well done. Your soul tells you what gives you joy. What does it matter what Thomas and Richard and Harry and Mrs. Grundy say? Be still and listen to yourself. Eye has not seen, nor ear heard the glory and satisfaction that await him who listens to himself. Well done, good and faithful servant. Enter into the joy of your Lord, who is your deepest self. Chapter 14. What has he achieved? We were talking about the new thinking and the increased efficiency it brings to people. Evidently, he didn't think very well about the practical aspect of the new thinking. He said it's fine to help people cope with their problems, but it doesn't get rid of the problems. And I said I thought that if it never did more than help people get through things, at least it helps more than anything else that has been done. But let's be sure, and I cited my own experience as proof. I then called his attention to other prominent people in the new thinking whose conditions and health have improved markedly. One of the names mentioned was that of a successful lawyer known to both of us. "Well," he asked, "what has he done that is so wonderful? Others have done such great or greater things that they have never heard of the new thinking." Of course, the principles of the new thought are the principles of life itself, and in all climes and ages there have been people who, consciously or unconsciously, lived by the principle and thus manifested health, which means wholeness of mind, body, and environment. The ways of wisdom are always ways of placidity, and all its paths are peace. And wisdom is as omnipresent as the ethers, to be used by him who inspires it, by him who desires it, above all else. Every pleasant cause and thought in this world comes from the mental breath of wisdom, and every soul that has ever lived has lived breathing wisdom in proportion to its inspiration of wisdom. It has been the placidity of his ways and the peace of his path, and his ups and downs have arisen from the fact that he breathes wisdom only in points. Of course, he still breathes mentally, but he does not always breathe wisdom. It is like a man who breathes fresh air in the open air for a while, and then enters a closed room or goes down a mine and breathes poisonous gases. Just as physical health depends on the amount of pure air breathed in, so physical, mental, and environmental health depends on the amount of pure wisdom breathed in, and no one will deny that most of us breathe in a large proportion of poisonous gas of the mental type instead of pure wisdom. We breathe on other people's thoughts after them, just as we breathe on the air after them. This thought-breathing destroys our physical, mental, and environmental health. We need to get out into God's fresh air and breathe new thought, or we will suffocate. Old thinking is division, dissension, separation, competition. New thinking is the great opening of principles, unity, harmony, God, good, freedom, peace, love. The new thought is eternal, from age to age. Those who inspire it are the strong and complete, whether they breathe it consciously or unconsciously. By the teachings of the new thought, the world is learning to do consciously and intelligently what a few have done here and there throughout all ages. And we need to be reminded of the advantages of knowing how and why we do things. What has he done that is so wonderful? The lawyer we are talking about. He is not what the world calls great in any line. He has not built a Standard Oil system, nor has he brought it down. He is not a Roosevelt or a Togo or a Napoleon or even an Elbert Havard. His desires and ambitions have run on other lines. He is not built that way. He doesn't have it in him to be a Rockefeller, and he's happy with that. So why should he compare himself to Napoleon or Rockefeller? We measure roses and violets, daffodils and chrysanthemums by the same standards. It is inconsequential to the violet because it spills its sweetness into a shady corner instead of tossing it at high noon from the top of a sunflower stalk. We do not measure violets with other violets, not with sunflowers or hollyhocks, roses or peonies. And men are more diverse than flowers. Each man has his own individuality, his own soul specifications to develop. Each man comes as the flower of a peculiar ancestry, like no other ancestry of man. To judge one man by another is as foolish as to judge a violet by a sunflower. This lawyer of whom we speak is in a class by himself. He has not achieved what Rockefeller has, but he has achieved something that satisfies him more than the stock of a dozen Standard Oil magnates could ever do. And what is success but personal satisfaction? To succeed is to accomplish what one sets out to do. Growing success is a matter of growing ideals and a succession of successes. Our attorney is satisfied with the new thinking and its effectiveness in his case through its use. He has accomplished a succession of things he wanted to do, literally rebuilt himself and his environment as well, and has developed new ideals and energies that show him a joy-filled eternity ahead. He is satisfied with the new thought as a working principle. He continues to work with it, growing daily in wisdom and knowledge, growing daily in greater graces of character, mind, body, and environment. It is the man who does not live the teachings of the new thought, who judges them by the outward appearances of other men's lives. Chapter 15. Will and Wills. In a copy of an old magazine there is an article entitled, "What New Thought Women Say About the Will," by an old thought woman who does not sign her name. This article is as confusing as anything I have read recently. I am amused, and yet it strikes a sensitive chord of stored memories. And I sympathize, that is, it enables me for the moment to re-enter the same pathos or condition this woman describes. Every step she has taken, I too have experienced, but I have gone through it all and emerged into the higher spiral where I am able to understand the phenomena of wills in relation to each other and in relation to the whole. In a nutshell, the idea of the old thinking woman is, the will is part of that illusory mortal mind. It is the executor of the world, the flesh, and the God's will is a fiction with a capital letter. Keep in mind. Then she goes on to tell how willful she used to be. She dominated her relatives, friends, and enemies alike, and even cats and dogs. There was hardly any way the will could dominate that I did not work to its limits, she says. I intended to marry without declaring my opinions, to obtain property and support, but to refuse all sensuality because I was adamant against procreation. Decidedly an unpleasant person, I should say. No wonder I was cordially hated by those whom I mesmerized and mocked. No wonder pain, anguish, hatred, suffering, disappointment followed in the wake of every triumph. No wonder. Then he got tired of it all and gave up all will in a complete loss of will, autovolt, God's will, every kind of will. There is a miraculous condition of affairs, she says. Then she goes on to preach Christ's teaching of non-resistance. Every positive character, and probably every negative character as well, goes through an experience identical to this woman's at some point. The more pronounced the character, the more definite the change from autovolt to autona. A negative character will eternally cling to her self-volt, and the abandonment of her will cause her all the anguish that this woman experienced as a result of using her will. Now, without pointing out the errors of this writer, let me give my statement of the will, its nature and uses, after which I think you will see that the woman's understanding of old thinking needs to grow a little. Will is the electric motive force of the universe, the only force there is. Will is the energy that forms worlds and spins them in space, that dissolves all forms and creates anew. Will is attraction and gravitation. Will is love and thee. Will is hate. Will is passion, the active force of the one. Will is omnipresent and omnipotent. Without will, there could only be stagnation, death, annihilation. But there is will, and there are wills. There is an all-pervading, all-evolving will, and there are innumerable little wills plunging and struggling. There is a great ocean, and there are innumerable small tossing waves, each bent on its own goals to rise above its neighbors. On the unseen side, the will is one, the only one. On the seen side, there are only wills beginning and ending within the personal circle. Will is the executive of omniscience. The will is the executive of ever-evolving universal wisdom. The will of God is not a fiction, it is the one and only immutable covenant against which personal wills incessantly and futilely hurl themselves for their undoing and the increase of knowledge. All wisdom and all will are the great ocean from which personal wisdoms and wills are hurled and to which they all return. Will and wisdom are all there is in the universe. They are one and inseparable. Water is correctly formulated as H2O, and every atom in the universe, seen or unseen, is simply will in definite and varying proportion of wisdom. The less wisdom in the mix, the more foolishly the will be exercised. Will is commonly used as a name for the will exercised by the conscious mind of 5%. The individual reasons from his own narrow view and establishes his will to execute his finite judgments. For the moment he establishes his judgment as infallible, grits his teeth, clenches his fists, and moves forward until he meets the universal will head-on. It is as if one of your hands establishes a judgment of its own and tries to force the other hand to move according to its pattern. Your right hand sees and judges for a right hand, but not for a left hand. So also with this old thinking woman. She established her judgment and tried to subjugate relatives, friends, enemies, animals, subjected. To what? To her will, not subjected to her judgments. Her will was simply the executive, the sheriff's posse. Having a strong will, he had his way in many cases where a less determined individual would have upheld equally severe judgments without having the will to execute them. Was his evil will an illusion? No, but her wisdom was a deficit, a personal quantity, and therefore her will was misguided. I am a very strong-willed woman, and I make myself of it, but there was a time when I made a complete fool of myself by setting up my judgment for other people's guidance, and sending my will to execute my judgments, whatever the other does. My will was first class. Likewise my intention, but my judgment was extremely narrow and rudimentary. I got into all kinds of trouble, just like this old thinking woman, and finally I couldn't take it anymore. I went to the Lord, prayed and anguished and humbled myself as I needed to. My problem was that I had not yet learned that my judgments were not the best on earth, and my will was not the only executive. All these failures on my part made me search. Finally, higher judgments and a more powerful will among men. I could not find them. Not a writer, not a lecturer, not a friend, showed me clearly that his judgments were as crooked and his will as limited as mine. So I turned to the unseen and unbelieved, but much needed and desired, God. I gave up my will, I said, not my will, but thine be done. It was hard to do, but being a woman of very strong will, I did it, and I did it well. I lived daily with Jesus in that sublime Sermon on the Mount. Of course I found peace. Having given up all personal goals and ambitions, and given up all efforts to better myself or the world, I found peace. An Indian lying long in his canoe, floating gently and safely down the wide Columbia to the ocean, is an emblem of peace. The individual who finally realizes that what he has been tearing himself apart, trying to accomplish, is already being accomplished by a broad river of will, of which his own will is but a ripple, finds himself embodying peace. He who loses his life will find it. He who loses his will find it. For the first time I thought I was giving up my will when I was only giving up my judgments, and in return I gained the total will of the universe. I changed my point of view, that was all. I had been seeing countless myriads of struggling, tortured individuals, each struggling in chaos to bring order according to their judgments. Now I saw God as the animating soul, will and wisdom working in and through these fighters of a formless wave struggling to rise. I became the Indian at rest, realizing the powerful will beneath me that was unerringly leading me in the right direction, even when I was doing nothing. I rested and let the all-will carry me and everyone else. At times, it seemed that I should stand up and make this one or that one do the right thing, but I used my will on myself and stayed out of the way. I couldn't see that the all-will was making this go right. But I had failed so miserably when I was in charge of things that in desperate desperation I decided not to resist anything, not to force anyone, but simply to trust that the all-will would make things right. I kept telling myself, hands off, let go, and let the all-will handle it, until I actually learned to let the all-will do it. Of course, I thought, just like this old thinking woman does, that I wasn't exercising any will at all, but I was doing it, and she is doing it too. The only difference between the use of my will before and after this autona was this. After giving up my will, I had the all-will on my side for the first time. And so easy it seemed to let the all-will do everything that I didn't realize I was using any will at all. Like Solomon, I asked for wisdom. Understanding as it came to me, I saw that whenever the all-will backed my will and made action easy, I was on the right path. Whenever I felt a sense of struggle against some other will, I was on the wrong path and had to let go and rest. Many times, the thing I could not do at one time without that feeling of struggle, at another time I could do it easily with the feeling that the all-will was backing me up. Sometimes the whole will would back me up by doing what someone else opposed, and yet it did not back me up when I opposed it. At first, all this seemed like the capricious guidance of a spirit, but eventually I began to see a principle in it. I found the law of individuality. I found that when I wanted to do something I desired, the whole will backed me up. Unless I foolishly wished to reduce what another body wished to do, not what another body wished me to do, but what it wished to do without interference with me. Do you see the point? For example, I wanted to teach and heal. Another wanted me to cook and sew, and the spirit backed me up. I taught and healed serenely. The other was enraged and worried, and yet, all serene, I knew that the all-will backed me up, but the other smoked. I regarded smoking as wasteful and harmful, and whenever I expressed my opinions on the subject, I felt that the whole will did not back me up. This one had a right to smoke because he was not interfering with the free action of another. But when he tried to return me to the kitchen, he had to use his personal will without the backing of the all-will, because the all-will was backing my will to leave the kitchen. On the other hand, the all-will was backing up his will to smoke. Therefore, when I tried to interfere, I was opposing not only his will, but also the all-will. This is just what gives us so many hard knocks in the world, my dear. We fail to respect each other's rights, and in doing so, we stand not only against their personal will, but also against the whole will. No wonder we take some horrible blows when you exert your will against another's freedom of action. You disconnect yourself from your source of supply of will, the all-will, so you clench your fists, grit your teeth, and contract your lungs and muscles. You are disconnected from the source of supply of will, and you contract to force your willpower against another. Then you are exhausted, and you have accomplished nothing, for if you succeed in making it good this time, it hates you for it, and will burst forth with more force at the next opportunity, because the all-will backs it up, even in the actions you judge as bad. Remember, the all-will backs up all personal will, except when the personal will interferes with free action, not the interference of another will. So, when you try to interfere with the free action of another, you impose your will upon him, just as you expel the breath from your lungs. Then you have to recover the breath and your will. Again, it takes time to fill you up with will again, and while doing so, you suffer all those horrible sensations of remorse, weakness, disgust that come over you after one of these struggles with another will. You have all these feelings whether you succeed in overthrowing the other or not. Oh, it is not worthwhile, my dear. It is not worthwhile to use your will except when you feel that the whole will is backing you up. What the New Thought people refer to as cultivating the will. It is simply cultivating the knowledge and awareness of the all-will. It is simply the recognition of the will, the recognition of the unceasing and underlying momentum of the universe that is working within and through the individual to express more and more beauty, wisdom, and goodness. To use the small personal will apart from the all-will, one must contract and thus expel his will upon other people and things. To use the all-will, he must first know that he is right. Then relax and let the will flow through him to accomplish according to his word or desire. In using the small personal will, one recognizes himself as a member of a multiverse, a being separate and apart from all other beings. To use the all-will, he must first have learned his relationship to it and to all other persons and things. He must have recognized the universe and himself and others as ordered and useful members of the universe. Only when he recognizes the unity is it possible for him to renounce the exercise of the little personal will and let the all-will act through himself and every other man. He who loses his will find it united to the all-will, and after all, it is not his will that he has lost, but his beliefs about it, and its use has ascended higher, and he has glimpsed the unity of things. He has hitched his chariot to omnipotence, and behold, all things are done according to his word. The whole backs the individual in whatever good, bad, or indifferent thing he wishes to do, so long as the individual does not interfere with other individuals. So, you see, in whatever efforts you may make toward self-development, you have the whole will working with you and through you, and if you stick strictly to business, nothing on earth or in hell can stem the tide of your will, and thus defeat you. Chapter 16. About vibrations. Vibration is life. Vibration is motion. All movement is vibration. All vibration is life. You expand your chest with an inhalation of air, contract your muscles and exhale. This is vibration. Your heart beats. This is also vibration. Every tiny cell in your body is beating or vibrating, just as your heart and lungs do. When your chest expands, you inhale fresh air that not only goes to your lungs, but to all parts of your body. The air blows like a cool breeze around the countless millions of cells that make up your body. These tiny cells, in turn, expand and take in air. Then the cells contract and expel the air, and your lungs also contract and expel the air out of your body. Now, this air that is vibrated through your body serves to cleanse your body. The particles in position in the cells of your body are expelled and carried out in the airflows that are vibrated through your body. If it were not for this vibration of your body that keeps the air flowing through it, your body would soon become clogged with dead matter. The nerves and arteries of your body are constantly contracting and expanding to move the blood that carries the food supply to the cells and carries its waste, just as air is carried to and from the cells. It is by constant vibration, contracting and expanding, that your stomach and intestines digest food. It is by the vibration of the cells of trees and plants that the sap flows through and feeds the tree. Even a stone is composed of tiny cells that breathe, just like the cells of your body. Just like your body as a whole, each individual, whether cell, plant, animal, man, lives vibrating, expanding and contracting to take in the new and expel the old. Each mind also lives vibrating, alternately expanding to receive new ideas and contracting to get rid of old ones. Then there is another type of vibration, by which one individual communicates with another. Imagine that the ether is composed of infinitely small elastic balls. If you hit one of those small elastic balls, you will hit the next ones and it will bounce back, and the hit ones will hit the next ones, and so on and so forth. The hit will travel from one little ball to the next, all the way to the edge of creation, if you can imagine such a place. The blow you strike causes all the little elastic balls to vibrate or move back and forth. Now, if I am far out in space, and I feel the little elastic balls vibrate against me, I know it means something from experience. I learn what each kind of movement means. If you clap your hands together, the vibrations of those little elastic balls hit my ear, and I say, I hear somebody clapping. If I face you, the vibrations hit my eyes, and I say, I see someone clapping. In either case, your movement causes the ether to vibrate, and I feel the vibrations. If I had no ears or eyes, I could not feel the vibrations, but they would be there in two ways. Every movement made causes the ether to vibrate at its particular pitch, and wherever there are ears or eyes, the vibrations are registered. When you speak, you set the ether in motion, whether there are ears to hear or not. And when you keep perfectly still and think, you also set the ether in motion. Your brain sets vibrations in motion, as well as your tongue. There are people who can hear thoughts, just as you hear the speech of another. In time, we shall all hear thoughts. We are all developing mental ears. Thoughts are higher vibrations than spoken words and travel farther. You know that a low, rough voice makes a lot of noise when you are close to it, but a high-pitched, shrill call can be heard much farther away than the low, rough voice. The loud voice produces short, sharp, long-range vibrations. Now, thoughts produce infinitely shorter, sharper, longer-range vibrations than the voice, and thought vibrations travel farther and much faster, and where there is another thinker ready to listen, thoughts are recorded. Many times we hear other people's thoughts and mistake them for our own, for we all have at least a little mental hearing. When you speak clearly and distinctly, your voice is heard much farther away than if you speak hurriedly and carelessly, and other people can more easily understand what you say if you babble your thoughts or your words. Ethereal vibrations carry babbled meanings. As people learn to think clearly, their thoughts carry farther and find more listeners. In time and with life practice, we will easily think in ways that people on the other side of the earth can hear us. Not only that, but we will think so clearly and high that the inhabitants of Mars and Venus and the Sun will also hear us easily. I would not be surprised if what we call solar rays are really the thought vibrations of the inhabitants of the Sun. What if we receive and respond to their thoughts and think them as our own thoughts? Chapter 17. The I Was and the I Am. Someone has said that an honest man is the noblest work of God. 10,000 others have repeated his little speech with a solemn shake of the head and a wink of the eye that conveyed the opinion that God is stingy with his noble works. Then came another man who paraphrased that. An honest God is the noblest work of man, he said, and 1,000 or more of us wondered, why had it not occurred to us to say that? Sure enough, and the other thousands and thousands raised their hands and shouted, blasphemy, stoning, stoning, get him out of. The church where the ghouls will get him. They cast him out, but the spooks did not catch him, and many of the thousands are adopting their cry. An honest God is the noblest work of man. Why not? An honest God is of greater value than many honest men, is he not? God is the creator of man. Unless God is honest himself, his honest man is only an accident rather than an image and likeness of himself. But according to the paraphraser, man creates his God. Well, that is only a paraphrase and true only in one sense. God is man's creation. Of God is simply his mental concept. Of God is God as he sees him, or so from his point of view. A God of honesty is the mental concept of a man whose soul recognizes honesty and loves it. A God of power is the mental creation of one who recognizes and loves power. A God of love is the mental creation of one who recognizes and loves love. A God of vengeance is the mental concept of one who loves vengeance. You may think that your mental concept of God is not so important, for it is all in your mind, and the real God is what he is independently of your idea of him. But it matters vitally to you. It is not God as he really is that is creating you, but God as he appears to you. Your concept of God is creating you in his image and likeness. If you think of God as a great man on a throne with a long white beard and an expression of an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, you may depend on being transformed into a vinegary-faced old man who will want to die and run away from it all. If you think of God as a God of power, love, wisdom, beneficence, you will strive to be perfect as he is perfect. If you happen to be one of the fools who has said in his heart that there is no God, your life will be a crazy patchwork, and your end will be that of the stoic who defies the earth to do its worst to him, which it probably will, being an earth willing and ready to give to each according to his demands. You are creating yourself in the image and likeness of the Lord your God, the God enthroned in your heart. What kind of God is in your heart? Is he small and vindictive and capricious, a kind of policeman to tell your troubles to receive comfort from, and to send punishment to your enemies? Or is your God the principle and substance behind all creation, the power, the wisdom, the love of all creation, a God who loves all, is just to all, generous to all, favors none? But no matter how high a God you carry in your heart, it will do you little good unless it is an I am God. The gods of most men are I am gods. They believe that God did wonderful things for the children of Israel, that he performed great miracles for the apostles and disciples of Jesus. But in this age, they think of him simply as the God I was, who stands aside and lets man run things, man and his malicious animal magnetism. Believers in the God I was are also great advocates of the God I will be, who will come again to judge the wicked and establish his kingdom on earth. And these believers in God I will be think that their only business in life is to wait until the great I will appear. People who worship the I was and the I will be are never demonstrators. Between admiration for the I was and anticipation for the I will be, they fall to the ground and wait for the I will be in themselves and others. Only the God I am does things. The I am love impels you to love now. The I am wisdom inspires you to act on your ideas. The I am power performs miracles, not yesterday or tomorrow, but now. The God I am is the God who works in you and in me today. His ways are not the ways of the God I was, nor of the God I will be. They are the ways of the I am, new, different, the ways of today, not of yesterday or tomorrow. I know a dear woman who worships the I was and the I will be. She entertained Schlatter, the healer, and was firmly convinced that she was a literal reincarnation of Jesus Christ. She accepted Schlatter's word, also accepting his excuses for not immediately establishing a literal kingdom here on earth, as described in the book of Revelation. He told her that he had other work to do at the moment, that he was leaving, but that he would return soon and establish a literal kingdom. She swallowed it all without chewing once. Schlatter left, and later a body was found in the mountains that was said to be hers. Since Schlatter's disappearance some years ago, this lady has spent her time writing about him and searching for his return. The I was and the I will be absorb all her spiritual attention. In the meantime, she lives in a small mining town where, in the life bustling around her, she does not see God. Long ago he wrote to me asking for help in speaking the word of freedom for a man on trial for his life. He said he was absolutely innocent and that there was a terrible conspiracy against him. The man was condemned to die, still protesting not his innocence, but self-defense. It was a case of confusion, with 2 men and a woman, followed by a drunken brawl and the typical excuse of, "I didn't mean to do it." This lady's sympathies were all with the man, and her letters to me were pitiful. Her heart was torn by his agony, and his wife, grieved and convulsed with horror and helpless anger at the wickedness of the wretches who falsely vowed her life. The way in which evil triumphed over justice was terrible, she said, and she knew that when Schlatter returned, justice would be done and the wretched, wicked wretches would be annihilated, or words to that effect. You see, she has no conception of an I am God who rules now. She judges the acts of men and begs Schlatter to come back and set things right. She remembers that the I am put 10,000 to flight with Gideon's 300 pitchers and candles. She simply crept up and frightened them into panic. He knows that the I was hardened Pharaoh's heart to repeatedly lie to the Israelites. He knows that he had to ask God's permission before tempting Job. He knows that God said, "I make peace and create evil," and that the Lord made all things himself. Yes, even the evil one, for the day of evil. He knows all these things of the great I was, but that the I am now works in the hearts of men, that God now hardens one heart for perjury and another for truth, one for murder and another to lay down his life that his friend may live, that God now works in these seemingly antagonistic ways, and thus works perfect righteousness, wisdom, love. It has never entered his mind, he cannot imagine that any man will meet any form of death until he himself is ripe for that particular form of death. He has read that 18th chapter of Ezekiel, where God explains that every man dies for his own sins, not for the false oaths of another, but the great I was said it, and the I will be says it, but the I am is absent. Thus he thinks. Somewhere in the Old Testament, in the Psalms, I think, the statement is made that those who die are taken away from evil, which comes, I opine, that this is literal and always true, that death never comes except when the dying man needs relief from things worse than death, things that lie just ahead of him on his way. The man this friend wrote to me about deserved his death, not because of the specific act for which he was judged, but because of other thoughts and acts that preceded it. The man was on the wrong path, a path of many and growing evils. Death took him off the path at the right time and gave him a better start in some other state of existence. I must believe this or deny the power, wisdom, or omnipresence of the God I am. I must accept the wisdom, power, love, and presence of God. By faith or my own judgment at first glance, as I know from experience that appearances are deceiving and that my personal judgment must be based almost entirely on appearances, I prefer to hold fast to my faith in the presence, power, wisdom, and love of the God above all. So, I don't think this man died too soon because of other people's anger and lies. I think he died because of mental traits and tendencies that are hidden from me, but not from the I am. I think it was the spirit of the I am moving on the face of his soul depths and saying, "Let there be light," that gave him his experiences and his particular form of death. And I think his soul moves on to a greater light, freed from the burdens of bad habits of mind and body that were formed in the old life of ignorance. Oh, it's easy to believe this about someone I never met. It's not so easy to apply the same principle to my own life and the lives of those I care about. But I'm trying. Even in the smallest details of life, and I am growing daily in the ability to recognize the God I am in all my ways. I know this is the only way to live. The New Thought, Chapter 18, The Immortal Thought. The I am of every being is God, the one force, wisdom, will, mind, the one actor in all action, the one creator, disintegrator and recreator. The I am of you is one, the only one. The I am or ego or spiritual being of yours is a thinker. All thought is realized by the one thinker. Mortal thought or mortal thought. Your body is an organization within you, the real you, the I am, the thinker. An organization within you of the thoughts that you, the I am or God, are thinking. Your body is the present conclusion of all the thoughts, good, bad, or indifferent, true or false, mortal or immortal, that you have thought, not thought or rethought since the beginning of eternity, and is constantly being changed by the new thoughts that come to you. The real you does the thinking, registering conclusions in the body. Bear in mind that it is not you. It does not even contain you. You are omnipresent, omnipotent, omniscient, spirit or mind, and your body is within you, in you. God lives and moves and has his being, and by you God is maintained. United, you have all power to think all kinds of thoughts, and you use that power. You know you do. You know you think good, bad, mortal, and immortal thoughts. Why question it? You think all kinds of thoughts, but that does not make you all kinds of being. You are the only being for whom all kinds of thoughts are possible, just as you are a being for whom all kinds of acts are possible. In their essence, thought and action are one. You are a human being when you play the piano and an animal when you sweep the floor. You are a being when you walk and a fish when you swim. Of course you are not the one being, whatever you do or whatever you think. You are the God being. Sometimes you think mortal thoughts, and sometimes you think immortal thoughts. The results are always recorded in your body, but you are always the same being, God, and you feel all kinds of ways. But you are always you, the same one being, God being. Your mortal thoughts are your thoughts of mortality, of death, and all that leads to death, of sin, sickness, unhappiness, all that tends to discourage you from wanting to go on living and thinking. Your immortal thoughts are your thoughts of life, activity, love, joy, all those thoughts that make you want to live longer. One thought differs from another, but you continue forever the same one being, God. All your confusion comes from confusing yourself with your thoughts, from thinking of your thought-constructed body as you, which is not, in its deepest analysis, your body. And all your thoughts are purely mortal thoughts, and only the real you, the thinker, is immortal. To be immortal is to be subject to no change, which is true only of the life principle. To be mortal is to be subject to change and death, which is true of every thought, even thoughts of life, love, joy. All thoughts are fleeting and therefore mortal. It applies to them. Evil disappears before the good thought, and the good becomes better, the best. The body is eternally changing, eternally receiving from the being or spirit a higher thought, and eternally discarding the lower thought. The body is mortal and will never be anything else, will never cease to change, will never cease to receive new thought and discard outdated thought, will never cease to die daily. If it could stop doing this for 1 hour, stop dying daily, stop discarding outdated thought, it would die altogether. Individual clinging to dead thought is the cause of all old age and somatic death. The body, instead of getting rid of its dead and dying thought through its eliminative system, allows it to continue to accumulate in the body until the death of the whole body comes as a relief, and the God Self goes on to new incarnations. All bodily energy is the energy of living thought. Death comes to the body when dead thought predominates. Unless we convert you, every new thing enchants it completely from the old, and its intense mental and physical activities keep the old moving outward and outward to make room for more of the new. Can you give any reason under the sun why human beings should not continue to live the life as a child and escape the death of the body as a whole? There is no reason to be found in science, logic, or nature. The only reason lies in our artificial life. We fill the mind with unused knowledge. We fill the body with 2 or 10 times the food we need. All food is also thought. We glory in possessing more things than we can need or use. We spend our time mounting guard over our possessions to prevent others from using them. Is it any wonder that we become literally burdened until our bodies are too bulky for any life more strenuous than the grave? Life for us is too real, too serious. We want too much, and as long as we persist in living at this dying pace, the grave will be our goal. I said that in its last analysis, all thought is mortal thought. This is true of formed thought or thoughts. Thought substance is eternal. Thought substance is matter without beginning or end, and matter in its original state is mind or spirit. The one thinker and his thought material, one and indivisible. Thought substance is immortal, immutable, but all forms of this thought substance are mortal, ever-changing. Think of the ocean. The water is always the same, but the waves, the forms assumed by the water, change eternally. So it is with thought substance and thought forms. The body, being an organization of thought forms, of mortal thoughts, must die daily. But that thought substance, from which all its forms are made, is immortal mind. It is God being. Your body is simply an increasing series or organization of fleeting eddies in your immortal God being, too wonderful to understand. Well, never mind. Better not understand it too firmly. It might turn out to be just another weight on your mind anyway. Let the thought come and go in your consciousness as the waves come and go in the ocean. In time, you will realize that it is true that you and the Father, body and soul, are all one and eternal. Just take it for granted, dear one, and love and be radiant, happy. Thus you will use mortality to demonstrate immortality. Chapter 19. God in Person. God is not person, he is all persons. The universe is a stupendous whole, whose body is nature, and God the soul. This means that nature, which includes man, is God's body, and God's body is to him what your body is to you. A statement of belief that changes eternally as experience teaches you more. The only body God has is your body and mine. The only brains you have are your brains and mine. The only experience he has is your experience and mine. The only judgment he has is your judgment and mine. The only way God has to prove anything is through your experience and mine. You have heard it said that you cannot teach a man something he does not already know, that to educate a man is to bring out into consciousness what is already within him by his own experience, and by the teaching of others, he becomes conscious of the wisdom that was all the time within him. Everything is latent in God, the All, just as it is in you, and God becomes conscious of what he knows by the same processes by which you become conscious. Your true self is God. Observe yourself, and you will see how God does things. God is wisdom, but wisdom and knowledge are not identical. Knowledge is wisdom tested by the only test, experience. All wisdom is latent in the soul of God, which is you, your soul, and mine. God's wisdom is expressed in his body or statement of belief, which is your body and mine. God knows everything, but he knows that he only knows what he has demonstrated through you and me and all of humanity and animality and vegetableness. Some call it evolution, others call it God. If God knew more, he would not suffer through us. This is equivalent to saying that if you and I knew more, we would not suffer. There is no you and me, there is only God. Evolution is simply God coming to awareness of himself and his wisdom. Your body is a part of God's body. Your soul is God. The only life of all creation do you want to make his people suffer? Of course not. You want to make yourself suffer. Of course not. You are God, and you don't intentionally make anyone suffer, unless you think you have to. The rest of the suffering you have not yet learned to avoid. In other words, God has not yet learned to avoid it, but evolution is still evolving, and sighing and sadness are already fleeing before the dawn of wisdom coming to itself. God is learning to enjoy himself in the flesh, in your flesh, and in mine. What is flesh? It is mind. God is learning to enjoy himself in his own mind, which is your flesh and mine. He continues to think through you and me until his statements of belief, his body of flesh, bring only joy to all creation and uncreation. Why did he make the 10 Commandments? Why do you establish laws for yourself? Because you glimpse higher things than you have yet experienced, and you establish laws that you intend to keep. But you always keep those laws, don't you? Why? Because your body is an organization of intelligent cells, each of which has its own will. You glimpse the truth that love is the greatest thing in the world. You establish a commandment, thou shalt not be impatient or angry. Before a day passes, you catch yourself breaking your commandment. You forgot it. In other words, the more intelligent cells in your body recognized a beautiful truth and enacted a new commandment for all cells to live by. But the less intelligent cells, remaining unconvinced of that beautiful truth, and being in a large majority, you did their will, you became angry. Now, God recognized through Moses very beautiful truths and established laws to govern those who were not yet intelligent enough to recognize those truths for themselves. For thousands of years, God tried through these laws to make all people see these truths, so they evolved their people a little bit. The God in Jesus glimpsed an even higher truth and established another law, that you love one another, and yet, after 2,000 years of that law, not all people see it, and very few obey it. A Moses or a Jesus recognizes a truth so great that it cannot be perceived by the common majority of people, that it takes thousands of years of reiteration of that truth to make even the majority of common people see it. It takes centuries of evolution to really turn the world into an ideal conceived by a Jesus. It takes years of reiteration of your ideal and constant effort to live up to it before you can actually turn your body into that ideal. In other words, God envisions in Moses or Jesus a beautiful ideal of himself, but it takes him thousands and thousands of years to work that ideal, to evolve all people to the stage of wisdom and loving kindness. It is God's effort to work on his ideals that causes all suffering. This means that it is your effort to work on your ideals that causes all your suffering. An ideal drives change. The order established in the whole or in a part resents and resists change, hence the pain. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is set and refuses to change. This was what Jesus had in mind when he said, "Resist not evil," the established order. The flesh resists change because it is too myopic to see that change is good, because we are not yet convinced that all is good and that every change tends to a greater good. We fight change more or less wholeheartedly. Within us we have the same high ideals, the same setbacks and wars, revolutions and evolutions, the same joys and sorrows that the children of Israel had, that the universe as a whole has had and is having. All history is the history of your own thoughts. Man is an infinitely small cosmos. Just as in history, ignorance has fought against the ideal, and yet, in time, the ideal has had its way. So in yourself, ignorance fights against the ideal and may seem to win for a time, but eventually the ideal has its way. A man in his ignorance may yield to temptation, but the results will carry with them temptation itself. When a child's fingers are well burned, he loses all desire to play with fire. There is no such thing as ruining our lives forever. Every soul has all eternity to learn how to live. Each soul is God, omnipresent, omniscient or omnipotent in potentiality, and all eternity is its school term, all space its playground. Death is merely a ceremony of ascent peculiar to kindergarten classes. A ruined life is but a ruined problem on Tommy's blackboard. It is erased to give Tommy, who has been learning from his mistakes, the opportunity to make a better sum. Be still and know that God and you are one, and all things will be clear. Chapter 20. How to reach heaven. The subjective or emotional self is the best of servants, but the worst of masters. All evil in the world results from transposing authority from the objective to the subjective, from letting emotion overflow with conscience and reason. All unpleasant reactions are due to the waste of energy that results from this transposition of authority. The emotional or subjective self is the storehouse of personal power. The objective self is the director of that power. Happy results come from the intelligent use of power. Unbridled unleashing of the emotional self is like starting the engine of a car and then leaning back and laughing or crying as the car races along at its own pace and kills or maims whatever crosses its path. Raucous, hysterical laughter betrays that emotion is out of control with directive power, and that personal power is dwindling below the point of safety and wasting power. Letting out more emotion than the occasion inevitably produces its after effects of depression. Depression of this type is due to diminished emotional energy and disappears as the system recovers while more energy is stored. Almost all the blues are caused by this reaction. Energy is wasted in mental or physical agitation due to anger or worry, or righteous indignation, or excessive sympathy, or having a good time, and then we wonder why we are so sad. We go off and have a good cry that relaxes us, fall asleep afterwards, and wake up without the blues, and wonder why more energy has been generated. That is the whole secret. Of real enjoyment of the kind from which there is no unpleasant reaction lies in perfect control of the emotional nature, in conserving your emotional power so that it is never depleted beyond a certain definite point of equilibrium, the point where there is abundance in well-controlled reserve. When one first begins to find and maintain this state of equilibrium, he feels that he can never again have a good time, that he must repress all fun and gloom and stability. But this is a misconception that will disappear as he acquires. There are heights and depths and breadths of fun and joy that can never be reached except by the balanced and controlled person. It takes emotional energy to enjoy, and the greater the reserve of energy, the deeper the enjoyment, and the less it will be wasted in boisterous movements and noises. One does not repress his enjoyment of an incident. He represses unnecessary expressions of his enjoyment, and each inhibited movement leaves him with so much more energy in hand with which to enjoy, to the extent that he stops wasting his emotional power in raucous laughter and unnecessary movements. He deepens his power of enjoyment. Laughter is on the surface. Real enjoyment is in the depths of being. It is the surface that one must repress, the waste of power, so that one can become aware of the true depths of enjoyment. Impulsivity and nervousness are due to diminished emotional energy and are invariably caused by letting the subjective, emotional self dominate. So much energy is wasted in unnecessary emotionalism that there is not enough left for enjoyment. There are no depths. It becomes a habitual waste of emotion for the most trivial things, and no reserve for the greater things that occasionally arise, all due to excessive expression of emotion. People who have not learned to control their expressions of emotion have not even tasted full enjoyment. The only cure for nervousness, impulsiveness, boisterous nationalism of all kinds is to be still, to cut off all unnecessary waste, and let the reservoirs fill up. There are two types of animated dispositions. One is the result of hysterical overflow of energy, without regard to the fact that the reservoirs of personal power are dangerously close to the point of total exhaustion. This type of animation often ends in tears, almost always in depression. The other type of animated disposition is the superficial expression of full reserves. One is like the spilling of water from a shallow vessel by shaking the vessel. The other is like the ripple of a clear lake. The depths are clear, still and happy, while the surface responds brightly and without waste to the passing breezes of amusement. The water vessel is exhausted by its expressions of fun. The clear lake enjoys its ripple laughter without waste. The larger the lake, the larger the waves. The same breeze that makes a pond curl will make Lake Michigan ripple with white-crowned joy. The greater the length, breadth and depth, the greater the waves. Thus, the greater the personal reservoir of emotional power, the greater the laughter of which it is capable. Loud laughter sometimes betrays the mind and the empty reservoirs. Sometimes it betrays the wide, deep and full reservoirs, and by its sound the listener can tell which is which. Who has not chuckled in response to loud, musical, infectious laughter and cringed at high-pitched, hysterical, loud laughter? Musical laughter, loud or soft, invariably indicates well-filled reservoirs of emotional power and real enjoyment. High-pitched, unmusical laughter high or soft nervous laughter invariably signifies nervous or emotional exhaustion of superficial purposes and superficial enjoyment, or none at all. Spoken, musical and amusic voices are other indications of these states of personal power. Gentle, graceful and intelligent gestures are still other indications of full reserves. Rough, jerky and unnecessary movements indicate exhaustion. The reduction of laughter and wasteful movements is one of the most important things in life. Emotion is the strength of the soul, that which accomplishes all the big things in life as well as all the little things. Every human being has access to unlimited soul force constantly flowing into him from the universal reservoir, but if he uses it as fast as it flows, uses it exaggeratedly in the small and less necessary things of life, he has no power for the greater things that every soul longs to do. How much power would the Niagara River world get if it were not for the great natural dam and reservoir power at the falls? If you want to do the big things, you must make sure that your energy is not wasted in a constant stream of small things. Every movement, every thought uses a definite amount of emotional energy. Every inhibition of a movement or stream of thought allows the increase of the upper reservoir, just as every stone added to a dam increases the reservoir and the power behind it. There are enough good things to do and think about in this beautiful world without dissipating our power in meaningless activities, such as tapping our feet or toes, swaying us from side to side, laughing uproariously, and so on. Yes, we learn to do things by doing them, but we want to do these useless things. Of course, they are not wasteful, unsightly, and we can learn to stop them by stopping them. Have so much more profound power to make things useful and beautiful. Half an hour a day spent simply to be still will add almost unbelievably to the depth of our reservoirs, and every time we remember to inhibit an unnecessary movement or fixation, we add another depth to our power. All of this can be easily tested with a little practice. Our energy is soul force, which is also wisdom. As our energy deepens, so does our wisdom, and our sense of humor deepens. Soul power is love and wisdom, the unique substance of which the individual is a gateway, a small or large gateway, depending on whether you allow the energy to flow quickly or conserve it for large uses, depending on whether you let it flow or dam it for personal use. There is enough soul power for everything, yes, but it takes time to build a dam, and the man who lets loose all his Niagara Falls of emotion on trivial occasions will have to spend most of his time patching his dam, and the man who drips all his energy into senseless and useless acts has no power behind his Niagara. You see, self-control is the key to heaven, and the time to use it is now, the place here. The earth is teeming with heaven, waiting to be conserved for individual uses. Love, power, wisdom flow through you into expression. Do not let it flow too fast. Do not waste it in foolish expressions. Cut the waste, use the power in wise directions, and let the tide rise within you, so you will come to the great things you wish to do, and behold within you the power to do them with joy. And there will be no consequences of depression. This is heaven, the highest heaven for the deepest soul, and the door is open to all. Vital energy is soul energy, love, power and wisdom mixed together. The body is a generator of vital or soul energy. Heaven and hell are states of the bodily being. The body filled with vital or soul energy experiences heaven. The body depleted of its soul energy lives in hell, driven there by unrestrained living, by wasting its vital or soul energy. Chapter 21. A look at heredity. No evolutionist can overlook heredity or underestimate it. He believes that each generation arrives on the shoulders of its predecessors and fully appreciates the value of good ancestors. The world's pride in its ancestry is not as foolish as it might seem. The more intelligence and culture my ancestors had, the greater my chances. There are no breaks in the law of growth, evolution, or heredity. Although the casual observer often thinks there are, every human being comes into the world as a pinnacle of things achieved by his ancestors and is a shut-in to do achieved by himself and his descendants. But who are my ancestors? Let me tell you that Ralph Waldo Emerson and Jesus of Nazareth are more directly my ancestors. Ancestors, than many of those whom the world calls my great-grandparents, there is a spiritual and mental kinship. Through which we inherit, there are spiritual and mental relationships to which we all owe far more of our goodness and greatness than can be traced to blood ties. On rare occasions, these spiritual and mental relationships exist within the line of blood kinship. The world does well to be proud of its ancestry, but it does better when it appreciates its spiritual ancestry. Do you think the poor abandoned child owes a greater inheritance to the woman who bore him and abandoned him than to the foster parents who reared him with love and wisdom? Our blood relations are not the only relations from which we inherit, nor when we do not do we cease to inherit. There is a Father of us all, and the oft-repeated claim that we are all brothers and sisters is not a fantasy. The fatherhood of God and the brotherhood of man is a fact, and the man who thinks he is limited by ignorance of his blood relations is himself ignorant. If his blood actions do not satisfy him, let him draw a new heritage from the greatest and best in the world. They too are his ancestors. And note this, not only does the son inherit from his parents from blood or spiritual ties, but many parents inherit from the son what the son has obtained from other sources than blood relationship. I've heard it said that culture is the soul of knowledge and the essence of right living. Where did our ancestors get it? I'll tell you, they got it by persisting in the very practices that are looked down upon, by generations of monastic seclusion, much of it imposed by others whose turn it was to obtain by force, by generations of strict self-control, by hours, days, and years of prayer, which is just a phase of entering into silence, and yes, even by breathing, like a dirty, crazy yoga. Though a lot of the breathing was forced by energetic efforts to get away from the angry deaf women whose wealth or daughters they were stealing. The force of evolution that drives this universe is very good at coming up with ways to get people to practice self-culture. Things like taking a full breath, meditating, affirmations, and so on are not new ways to practice self-culture. They are as old and universal as life itself. However, people have had to be tortured, starved, and hunted to do them. They had to be forced to develop their bodies, minds, and spirits. Their hard work has given us a lot of wisdom. One of the most important things we got from them is their creativity, which helped us figure out that 10 minutes of deep breathing on purpose is better for our growth than chasing our tails all day, and that 30 minutes of thoughtful silence is worth more than 3 to 4 hours of wrestling with the Lord, which our great-grandfather John Wesley and many of his heirs did every day. The main difference between us and our ancestors is that our ancestors had to work hard to improve themselves, but we, as their descendants, have learned how to use this to our advantage through evolution. We are learning how to save energy. Our ancestors spent all of their time forced to do physical exercises and half-conscious breathing. We, on the other hand, do that for only a few minutes a day and save our strength for mental and spiritual uses. And we wouldn't be as smart to do this without them. Humanity is a square, and none of us would be perfect without the work of our ancestors. But it is because of their work that man is on the verge of becoming perfect today. What they learned to do by laborious effort and mainly under compulsion, we do by instinct. It is by the work of man today, on this cusp, that his great-grandchildren will be brought to still higher cusps, with still greater instinctive knowledge. Take the most cultured person you know, trace his ancestry, and tell me where his culture began. You can't. Go all the way back to William the Conqueror if you want. Up to that point, you can call their ancestors cultured, but even then, their culture all the way back is a downward slide of rudeness. Compared to what we 20th century people call culture, and we must go back further than William to find the beginning of his culture. William the Conqueror was the illegitimate son of Robert. He began culture with Robert, and William's mother was a miller's daughter. Is she the mother of all culture? Robert. He was the third Count of Normandy, which means that his grandfather was an ordinary everyday guy who probably murdered someone particularly hateful to the king and was rewarded with an earldom. He left William the Conqueror and his exclusive progeny the soul of knowledge, the essence of a righteous life. If so, where did Robert's own grandfather and the ancestors of the poor miller's daughter get it? They roamed the same forests, fought the same battles, hunted the same beasts and men. Where did Roberto's ancestors gather the soul of knowledge? What were the miller's ancestors doing while Roberto's grandparents were gathering the essence of a good life? Well, I can promise you that the mother of Guillermo's miller's daughter was closer to the soul of knowledge and the essence of a good life than that demon Roberto. Yes, there are many educated people who are not cultured, but their children and grandchildren are proud of their culture. This is because what is just education, strict self-control, going into silence, or breathing like crazy dirty yoga, changes over time and unconscious celebration into pure culture. If any of us lack culture, you can be sure that our ancestors, both in blood and spirit, were among those who failed to get what people call uneducated by force. All life is education, and time turns education into culture, the soul of knowledge and the essence of a good life. There is no effort that is not needed to develop the soul of knowledge. Not a yoga breath, not an hour of silence, not a moment of strict self-control, not a day of hard work, not a sound or movement, whether it is joyous, sad, angry, or depressed, has not helped to free the soul of knowledge. One could have been left out without making culture less cultured than it is now. The difference between education and culture is like daily piano practice and the finished music of a Paderewski. Education comes first, and without it, there can be no culture. Education is today's work, and culture is the soul of well-used workshops. Why praise well-used workshops while putting down today's opportunities? If someone in your family or spiritual circle has died, they left you money or property that you can use to make more money. Some people hate this, but others think it's better than nothing. Who is more valuable to humanity? Someone who shows off their inheritance the way they got it, or someone who improves it through self-cultivation? Don't be a Chinaman and always bow to their inheritance. Be an individual and make it better. If your inheritance was bad, make it better. If it was good, make it even better. That's the important thing. Do it now. Chapter 22. Criticized and criticized. I don't want to be criticized, but you want to learn, don't you? Surely you are not satisfied that you know everything. Oh, of course I want to learn, but I want to learn for myself. I would rather be wrong than be criticized. I hate being told how to do things. I want to find out for myself. Solomon the wise man does not reason like that. Solomon prayed for wisdom above all things, and in receiving wisdom, he received everything else. The man who thinks he would rather be wrong than be criticized is, for the moment, a moral coward and not a Solomon. He values his feelings of the moment above wisdom. He does not want wisdom and knowledge above all things. He wants the wisdom and knowledge he can get without sacrificing his feeling of complacency. He is pleased as his friend says, "You're a good guy, a very admirable guy." He feels good as he thinks his friend considers him wise. He expands, smiles, and works his way up. In his moments of confidence, he will tell his friend that wisdom and knowledge are the greatest things in the universe. that we only grow by acquiring wisdom and knowledge, that growth is life, and life is love, or God. He will get a little excited and tell you that wisdom is God, the one desirable, and that by growing in wisdom, man becomes aware of his divinity. Just here, his friend, who is a prosaic and practical type, interrupts him. "Look, Smith," he says, "you're not running this branch of your business correctly. Check out how Thompson does things like that. It doesn't go any further." Smith instantly freezes, and Jones' confidences pick up the vibe. Smith is so sensitive, you know. He'd rather not know about better methods than bear the brunt of criticism. Jones talks a bit about the weather and leaves. Smith continues to think he desires wisdom above all things. He doesn't. He desires above all things that his vulto of approval be smoothed out. He does not know himself and will not know himself because he rejects all truth that does not make him feel good. He shuts himself off in 1,000 ways by which wisdom is trying to reach him. It is said that our enemies are our best friends. Emerson urges us to listen to them and learn from them. Burns exclaims, "Would that some power would enable us to see ourselves as others see us. It would free us from many and foolish notions." Our critics respond to the pull of love to free us from errors and foolish notions. Why not? Why resent criticism? We are all members of a stupendous whole. Why resent and reject another's suggestion is our own suggestion drawn by our own love, affirmed by wisdom and knowledge. We do not understand ourselves. We do not trust our surroundings. We say we want wisdom above all things. We want to understand. In our heart of hearts, we love wisdom above all things. Therefore, we attract it through all means. It is our soul's love of wisdom and knowledge that attracts to us the criticisms of friend and foe. If we really believed that we attract what we receive, that our own comes to us, that all things are working together to satisfy those of our soul, if we really believed all this, we would receive criticism in a friendly spirit, with senses alert to find the kernel of wisdom it is bringing to us. To resent criticism is to forward, to send away. A bit of knowledge your soul has been praying for, all because your approval lump has an abnormal appetite for prophecies of soft things. But to forward a criticism is not to get rid of it. It comes back to you again and again, and perhaps each time in a slightly ruder form. If you speak softly to a friend and he doesn't listen, you repeat in a louder tone. If he is very deaf, you shout and perhaps tap his shoulder to get his attention. All creation is alive and pursues the same tactics when you resent. You rescind a criticism, creation sends it back to you a little more emphatically. If you still resent it, creation puts even more force into repeated sendings. She continues in this way in response to your own semi-conscious desire for wisdom and knowledge, until, somehow or other, you take the kernel of knowledge contained in that criticism. Then, creation smiles and leaves you alone. In that vein, the way to avoid creation's blows is to accept its insinuations as they come to you, in the form of friendly criticism or suggestion. Not all criticisms are true in their entirety, but each one contains somewhere a suggestion from which you can benefit, by which you can grow in wisdom and knowledge. Don't let that little lump of approval cause you to forward that knowledge and bring the knocks of creation to bear on you. But don't get the idea that that little round kernel of approval is bad. It is not. It is a good and useful member of your family and deserves to be well fed, cared for, and respected. But feed it also with your own good opinions. Let it not tantrum and kick if it does not receive unlimited praise from others. Rise high in your own opinion. Know yourself as a unique and indispensable God to creation. You have powers and wisdom and knowledge possessed by no one else in the world. No one who has ever lived or lives will be better or more God than you, nor is anyone less good or less God than you. We are different, that is all. Every man has his individual goodness and peculiar point of view. Not better than yours, but different. It takes every man in the world to see all sides of anything or anyone. Every individual who is wise wants to see all sides of things. The only chance he has of doing this is to look at things from other people's point of view as well as his own, to put himself in other people's place, to see how others see, to vibrate with the other who sees another side of the same thing. Listen to your critic. See yourself as he sees you. He is your best friend, drawn in response to your soul's cry for more wisdom and knowledge. Be friends with him. Silence the clamor of approval with your own lofty affirmations of your goodness and worth. Hush the clamor and listen to the spirit in you. It will stop the chaff from the wheat of criticism. A little poof will blow away the chaff, and your soul will expand and grow in stature as it assimilates the wheat. Chapter 23. Nobility. We always come in contact with the people we live with and admire if you are dissatisfied with the present. Environment, you can change it by making the best of it, and in the meantime, preparing yourself mentally, physically, and in your behavior for the kind of people you desire. Prepare yourself for them, and make sure you don't waste energy in impatience for having to wait a long time. It takes mental and physical culture and pleasing behavior to prepare yourself for the kind of friends you want. There is no place in life that does not offer many advantages for the cultivation of all these things, but especially for the cultivation of a pleasing demeanor. You can be sure that if you can be charming and pleasing to ordinary people who can get on your nerves, you will feel right at home if a duchess shows up. Duchesses, you know, belong to the class of people who study all their lives to be charming and gracious. I'm talking about real duchesses now, not the kind who get rich quick and marry a title without having the real qualities of nobility. Someone has said that the world is divided into two classes, the civilized and the uncivilized. The hallmark of true nobility is the habit of being courteous to the uncivilized. There is no better place to acquire this gentle art than to live among the uncivilized. The young man who finds himself among the uncivilized and who proceeds to cultivate haughtiness and contempt for his fellows, who despises those with whom he is obliged to associate, who tries to be superior and impress others with his superiority, such an individual is forever fixing himself in the class of the uncivilized, where duchesses do not grow. You are what you are. Time spent impressing people is worse than wasted. Be yourself pleasing and honor not only your father and mother, but also your neighbor and your neighbor's maid, if you want to develop the qualities that will prepare you for the kind of fellows you desire, members of the true and authentic nobility. Cultivate your brain, dear. Cultivate your body. Cultivate your soul, all the best you can. But above all and in all and through all, cultivate the mental and physical behavior of true nobility. Always to the civilized class, and practice courtesy eternally, both with the uncivilized and the civilized. When a quarrelsome enemy followed Pericles home one dark night with the intention of harming him, Pericles sent his own servant with a lantern to take the man back home. Pericles did not descend from his own class to repay his uncivilized enemy in the same coin. Go and cultivate Pericles and your own high self. Then all desirable associates will seek you instead of your having to seek them. Greater credit belongs to him who sees true nobility through the dress and manner of speech of the maid than to him who recognizes it in silk and velvet voice. We are all members of the nobility, all descended through Adam and Eve, who never saw silk nor bowed. We are all sons and daughters of the Most High. Do not be deceived by contempt and incivility for our masquerade costumes, and do not value some of our dress above ourselves or yourself.